Hey guys, sorry for the late upload, I kinda got burnt out but I'm back. Chapter 41, Leaving for the base mansion. Devon, Aiden, Bane, and Camille were waiting for Raphael to come out of the room when Aiden's voice rang out. The two of you have got to be kidding if you think your costumes are better than mine. Staring at Devon, who was putting on an asymmetrical blue jacket with high collars, and a pair of matching blue slacks, Aiden sneered and then said, I really expected better from you, Devon, and as for you, I didn't expect really much because your fashion sense was always horrible, Aiden said as he stared at Bane. With a long red robe belt tied around his waist, Bane was putting on a full-sleeve one-shoulder loose jacket, brown pants with shin guards, and a small gourd which was wrapped with the red belt. Bane completely ignored Aiden and played with the insect which was on his finger. Meanwhile, Camille shook her head. She seemed to want to speak, when the room door was suddenly pushed open, and Raphael stepped out of it. As Raphael stood in front of Devon, Aiden, Bane, and Camille, the four of them became completely speechless. They kept staring at him with their mouths slightly open, and an expression that was full of shock could be seen on their faces. Not bad, Raphael. The both of us are the only ones with good fashion sense, Aiden exclaimed as he created a portal in the room. Since the words were coming from Aiden, Raphael didn't whether to be delighted about it or not. He, however, flashed a light smile. Raphael had kept his hair scruffy, just the way he liked it, but there was this good positive energy which he excluded from his body, that made people want to have a favorable impression of him, and as he stood straight, his body was brimming with self-confidence. You look good. Camille had always been a very straightforward person, and a few seconds after she saw Raphael, she said what was on her mind. Raphael nodded his head when he heard Camille before then saying, I know, and you too. Raphael responded, apart from Aiden, I think everyone is looking good, Bane exclaimed. He then chuckled, we are already late, so let's not waste any more time, Bane said as he moved towards the portal. Raphael flashed a light smile, and as Aiden and Devon walked into the portal, he stretched his arm forward. Shall we? With his blue eyes staring at Camille, Raphael's voice sounded. Camille was putting on a hooded long black robe with a picture of two bones forming at a cross and two skeletal heads which were then placed on her shoulders. Don't get the wrong idea about this, Camille said as she wrapped her hands around Raphael in a ladylike manner. I wouldn't dare. With that said, and the two of them walked into the portal. Bane, who was in the room the whole time, was left dumbfounded. His eyes twitched, and he couldn't help but be shocked by what he had just witnessed. And they said I was the troublemaker, Bane exclaimed, before then going into the portal like the rest. Once it was midnight, the students who had left the alley returned there. There were 16 of them in the alley, with everyone waiting for the remaining to join them before they moved. And in front of the Year 1 Elite Division students was Vs and that other woman from the Students' Council. The woman raised her hand, staring at her wristwatch, and a deep frown could be seen on her face. Where are the others? She asked in a displaced tone, and seeing the clueless look which was on the faces of the 16 students, the frown on her face deepened. If the 5 of them are not here in the next 2 minutes, then you are going to be doing the mission without them, and I can assure you they will regret. The woman suddenly paused, as right before she could complete her word, a dark portal appeared in the alley. A few seconds after, the portal was prepared, and 5 figures stepped out of it one after the other. How are you doing, bitches? Bane and Aiden's voices rang out a moment after. The two of them then stared at each other, as if they had spoken the same words, and a moment after their laughter reverberated in the alley. Enough, the woman's loud voice rang out. Vs, what are you still waiting for? Though the woman was putting on a veil, Vs could tell that she was glaring at him, and without any delay, he walked forward. Vs suddenly waved his hand and a machine appeared in the alley. The machine wasn't particularly large, and neither was it small. It was circular in shape with 2 sets of bars on both ends, and on the right bar, there was a small device attached to it. I believe there won't be any need for any information whatsoever. Everything you need to know about the base family has already been handed over to you, so do as you were ordered and ensure the base family is wiped out, the woman said. a second after the woman spoke, and was moved over to the machine. He clicked some buttons on the device which was on the right bar, and the machine began to illuminate a purple hue. The hue started to contract and soon turned into a vortex within the machine. The students stood there, seemingly flabbergasted at the vortex that had just appeared. This will lead to the street across the base mansion. It shouldn't take you up to 5 minutes to arrive in the mansion from where you would drop off, and whatever befalls you all in there won't have anything to do with the academy. We won't be pulling you out of any danger you encounter, and neither would we come to break you out if you all were to be apprehended. You are simply on your own. After the woman spoke, she went quiet for about 2 minutes, staring at the students and seeing there wasn't any expression of fear on their faces. She nodded her head. "Now, go make us proud," she said, while the students nodded their heads and began walking towards the vortex. Raphael's eyes were staring at the girl who was putting on a royal blue blouse and royal blue skirt, which was then topped off with a blue cloak and a pair of grey boots which were simply striking. The skirt stopped above her knees and fully revealed her enthralling legs, while her long wavy white hair cascaded on her back, with a flawless figure and a mesmerizing face. The girl stared at the two from the student council with a neutral expression on her face. "Don't you think it quite rude?" Suddenly, Camille's voice rang out. She stared at Raphael, and said, "You have a woman's hand wrapped around yours, and yet you are staring at another woman." Raphael flashed a smile, before then shaking his head and removing his hand away from Camille, and then walking towards the vortex. Camille chuckled, before also walking forward. "Elisa, you don't have to worry, I'm in the same group with her. I will keep her away from him," Becky exclaimed. Earlier, the woman that Raphael had been staring at was Alia, and because Becky, Melinda, and Elisa's eyes were fixed on him, they were able to see who it was that he was staring at, and a frown couldn't help but appear on their faces. "There's no need for that, Becky," Elisa responded, then heaved a deep breath. "Let's forget about Raphael for now. We have a mission at hand, and that's all that matters at the moment." Elisa was putting on a white bustier, white leather jacket, white leather pants, and white leather boots. There was then a starfish necklace around her neck, and after she uttered those, she dashed towards the vortex. Melinda and Becky stared at one another for a few seconds before the two of them walked into the vortex. As the students walked into the vortex, including Dwayne, who was donned in a silver hooded jacket, silver pants, silver eyes mask with a pair of black gloves, and black tactical boots, the woman from the student council folded her hands across her chest. "Do you think they are going to be able to get the work done?" Vz asked. "They better do," the woman responded, and began walking out of the alley. The base mansion is located in one of the most influential neighborhoods in the world. Despite being a mansion with 8,000 square meters and a building with both extraordinary interior and exterior design, the base mansion wasn't treated in higher regard on the lower south side. This was after all the neighborhood of one of the most influential people in the world. A street across the base mansion, a vortex suddenly appeared, and a few seconds later, 21 students stepped out of the vortex. "We are here," it was Levi that spoke. Among the students in the Year 1 Elite Division, Levi was perhaps the only one who stuck with something very casual. Levi was putting on a level 5 aramid white vest, black pants, and black boots. Levi was, however, putting on a belt with a skull buckle. He placed his hands inside his pocket, with a rather proud look on his face. "We remember the plan, right? Let's get this over with." The night is deep, the blue sky is dotted with countless small stars, while the street of the estate was aglow from the city lights. A couple of the students had stern expressions on their faces when they arrived at the street across from the base mansion. "Let's go," with that said, and they all dashed forward. While this was the first mission they were taking from the academy, the students had their own share of experience, and they moved in a manner that their footsteps couldn't be heard in the slightest. The street they were dropped off wasn't all that far from the base mansion, and a few seconds before they would come in touch with the gate of the mansion, 7 dark spiraling portals immediately appeared in front of the students. And within seconds, the students grouped themselves into 7 groups, with 3 students entering into one portal, and in a brief moment, the 21 students had disappeared from the surrounding. Pew, pew, followed by that sound were 5 of the lights which surrounded the mansion going black instantly. The guards who were roaming around the compound of the mansion stared at the light that just went off, and before any of them could even react, the remaining ones also went off. Raising his hand slightly, the guard who was putting on a black and white suit said, "Code 1033, it wasn't even up to 5 seconds after he spoke, and an arrow punctured through his left chest. The arrow penetrated through his body deeply that it came out on the other side of his body." Staring at the figure of the person who sent the arrow at him, the guard opened his mouth slightly, and the moment he tried to speak, blood gushed out of his mouth. "Code 1033, state your emergency." As the guard stumbled to the ground, a voice suddenly rang out from the wristwatch he had on. "Code 1033, state your emergency." As the voice rang out once again, a figure appeared in front of the corpse of the guard that had just fallen. The figure stared at Dwayne, who was meters away, before then taking the wristwatch the guard was putting on, and then said, "Code 1022, disregard." Jackson said. There was, however, no response from the other side, and a second after, Jackson sent Dwayne thumbs up. The base mansion was really massive, and despite the house shady act, the members of the household were living a rather worry-free lifestyle. It was, however, like most homes, which they prioritized themselves on the security at the front and the side of the building. Little was paid to be back of the mansion, and this was exactly where the students from the elite division focused greatly on. The former plan of the students was to have 2 groups handle the outside affairs of the mansion, but after weighing their options, they decided to make it 3 rather than 2 groups. While Dwayne, Jackson, and Aiden handled the back of the mansion, where the swimming was, Eliza, Sean, and Bane took the other end. Good job. The door at the swimming pool was where the students entered from, and after the guards were cleared, the 4 groups entered immediately. Bane was sitting cross-legged beside the swimming pool with a gourd in front of him, with his eyes shut closed. He placed both hands on the gourd, and insects could be seen coming out of the gourd. His hands which were placed on the gourd were without flesh, as once the insects came out of the gourd, they would eat his flesh, and coil themselves around his body before they moved about the compound. That was how the sequence went on, and a few minutes after Bane continued to create those red insects, it was no longer his hands that were without flesh, and the flesh on his head was no more. The only reason why Bane could be said to still be alive was his heart, which was still beating. What the hell? Sean, who was charging around the compound, delivering black thunderbolts to the guards he set eyes on, suddenly came across one of the guards who had his body covered in insects, and he couldn't help but be disgusted. The guard was in the same condition just like Bane, but unlike Bane, whose heart wasn't touched by the insects, the red insects didn't show the same compassion towards the guard it met, and they simply chewed them up like some bucket of chicken. The guards which were met with the insects were incapable of struggling, as once the insect touched them, they secreted a product that left their bodies paralyzed. They were unable to move a muscle, and neither could they utter a word, and this gave the insects access into pulling any stunt they want. Sean glanced at the guard who was being eaten by the insects for a few seconds before he then dashed forward, as the 2 groups focused on those areas of the mansion. The figure leading the attack at the front was Sylvia. It was, however, only after the other 4 groups had moved into the mansion, that Sylvia took action. Code 1035, we have. Before the female guard could complete her word, Sylvia slashed her sword at her neck. Blood splattered all over the area, as the female guard's head slid from her body. Sylvia, who had been in front of her, moved back very quickly, and she managed to avoid any of the guard blood from touching her body. Sylvia had stuck with her usual style of dressing and demanded it for her costumes. She stuck with bandages wrapped around her body, leaving only her long blue-tinted silver hair on the display. The academy, of course, had no problem with the choice of costumes the students chose, and they simply gave the students whatever it is they wanted. Ugh! With a full force wave of her sword, Sylvia sent two heads flying away. While it was Sylvia, Melinda, and Aidan that were at the front, the guards focused heavily on Sylvia, as among the three of them she was the one who butchered their colleagues like pigs. The materials which the Academy had used when creating Sylvia's costumes were ones she could control at will. Suddenly, Sylvia stretched her hand forward, and a portion of the bandages which she had on flew towards two of the guards. "Why you?" As the bandages wrapped themselves around the neck of the two guards, Sylvia propelled her body forward and then slashed her sword at the abdomen of the two guards. Among the Year 1 Elite Division students, there was only a handful of them who could match up to Sylvia's attacking force. It was one of the reasons why she was able to earn the respect of the dean and a few other teachers, and this time around, when Sylvia targeted the abdomen of the two guards, her sword sliced them up. Their upper body separated itself from the lower body, and as both guards fell to the ground, a horrified look appeared on the faces of the other guards. Even Melinda stared at the guards and she couldn't help but be stunned by what Sylvia had just done. The guards who were in charge of protecting the compound of the mansion soon found themselves rushing into the mansion for protection. However, before they could cover much ground, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Bang! Aidan clenched both hands into a tight fist and delivered a full-force punch at the guards who were at the front of the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Aidan said, then sneered at the other guards. The guards staggered several steps backward. They glanced at Sylvia, Aidan, and Melinda, and dismay was written evidently on their faces. Even staring at the bodies of their colleagues which were in a miserable state, fear gripped each one of them, and as a couple of them stared into the mansion from the glasses, the fear that they were experiencing grew significantly. It wasn't only outside the mansion that bodies were piling up, even the inside of the mansion was decorated in blood. The guards could see some of their colleagues being set ablaze, while a few others were having their heads smashed together by a tan, muscular figure. "Who are you?" one of the guards spoke in a frightened tone. One of the drawbacks of living in an influential neighborhood like the Lower South Side was that the riches disliked noises. Every household on the Lower South Side possessed a soundproof system that cancelled out any form of noise from other houses, so, whatever it was that was going on in the house nearby was completely oblivious to the others, except they were to receive a message directly. There was no way for others to figure out whatever it is that was going on. Wee woo, wee woo. A few minutes after, the base mansion was invaded, and the mansion alarm rang out. In one of the master suites in the mansion, a very bulky man with slicked black hair could be seen laying in bed with a big-breasted middle-aged woman. The man had a smile on his face the whole time, but the moment he heard the alarm that just rang out, the smile on his face vanished instantly. "Honey, what is that?" Exclamation mark. The woman asked in a frightened tone when she heard the alarm. The man, however, paused before he then said, "I will be right back," and without wasting any other time, he left the bed. He headed straight to the bookshelf in the room and pulling one of the books in slightly, a creak sounded from the shelf. Followed by that sound, was a door opening. The bulky man glanced at the woman who was putting on a short red nightgown, and he licked his lips. The man then gave the woman with a wink before he walked into his secret room. As the bulky man walked into a room that was equipped with 4 huge screens, he folded his hands across his chest, staring at the screens which were displaying all that was going on both in and outside of the mansion. The man placed his hand on his chin. "Strange," the man suddenly muttered. The slicked black-haired man was none other than the head, and the strongest member of the Bass family, Clayton Bass, and for a man who was seeing how the members of his household were being slaughtered, Clayton was rather very calm. After staring at the screen for a few more minutes, Clayton took the cigarette which was on the desk in front of him, along with the lighter. He then fired himself some cigarettes and puffed the smoke out, with a devilish smile appearing on his face afterward. Ring. Suddenly, the telephone which was on the desk began to vibrate, and as Clayton picked the phone up, a voice sounded from the other side. "Sir, we have a problem." A sneer appeared on Clayton's face when he heard those words. He puffed another smoke out of his mouth before then saying, "Isn't it just another bunch of clowns? I expect you to handle the matter quietly. Do not let the public or even the outsiders hear a whiff of what's going on. Don't disturb me any longer." Clayton was about to drop the phone, when the person from the other end suddenly spoke. "Sir, I'm afraid this is different from the others. There are 21 of them, and 16 are B-rank me." Bang! Before Clayton could hear the rest of the person's words, a sound suddenly rang out from the other end. "Who is there?" Clayton exclaimed with a deep frown appearing on his face. There was, however, no response, but as Clayton wanted to drop the telephone, a voice sounded. "Keep your neck clean, Clayton, we are coming for you." With that said, and the phone was cut off. 16 B-rank meta-human. Clayton's eyebrows furrowed as he recalled the word he heard. Who could it be? Clayton mumbled in a low voice before he then walked out of the secret room. The scream of the agony of the guards and members of the base family resounded throughout the mansion, as their bodies were being engulfed in flames. Despite a couple of them being meta-human with powers of their own, before these golden flames, they were rendered incapacitated. They had tried to use water, their powers, and even a fire extinguisher to turn the fire off, but regardless of which method they tried, their efforts were all fruitless. "Oh, help me!" As the scream of the members of the base family echoed through the mansion, a smile could, however, be seen on the face of the person who set the flames on them. "Ha ha 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 ha!" Xavier busted into laughter, as the cries of the base family brought nothing but a delight to him. The 4 groups which entered the mansion dealt with different parts of the room. Xavier, Martha, Alice, Ethan, Edward, and Levi dealt with the left side of the mansion where the family rooms, pantry, guest suite, utility, lounge, and 5 other rooms were, while the remaining 2 groups handled the right end. The base mansion wasn't entirely a house filled with meta-humans. Some humans didn't possess a bit of superpower in there, but the humans in there were highly trained that they would be able to stand head-to-head with some meta-humans. However, before the ruthless and well-organized students from the elite division, the members of the base family were in an uneasy state. While the numbers of the people in the base family far outweighed that of the elite division, they were inferior in all other aspects. Please, don't kill me." As the death counts continued to grow to an insane number in the base mansion, one of the members of the household knelt on the ground. The man stared at his colleague whose head was just separated from his body, then glanced at the very muscular figure in front of him, and he couldn't help but gasp heavily. However, in response to the man's plead, the already merged twins sneered, "Fool," a second after their voice rang out and a loud clap sounded in the mansion. Followed by that loud clap was the man's head exploding. Blood splattered all over the surrounding, leaving a disgusted expression on the twins' faces as they stared at the brain tissues which was on their palms. However, the look the twins had on their faces didn't stop them from moving on to the next target, and after bursting one man's head, they moved to the other. "Why you, Ethan and Edward, what the fuck are you doing with these people? Leave this one, and go take care of the rest." It was Alice who spoke when she saw the people the twins were targeting. Alice believed that based on the strength which the twins possessed, it was really beneath them to take care of these humans from the base family, as they were other stronger targets they could deal with. Levi, who was a few meters away, heard Alice's words after sending one of the members of the base family to the land of the dead. He stared at the twins. "Alice, there really is no need for that. The 2 of them are cowards, so let them handle the weaker ones," Levi exclaimed. It was during the moment when Levi spoke that the twins were facing one of the meta-humans in the base family, and when they heard Levi, a furious look appeared on their faces. The meta-human they were facing was a female, and as the twins held the woman's hands tightly, they pulled it so fiercely, that the bones and tissue in her hands began to crumble, and a few seconds later, the twins separated her hands from her body. "Oh!" The woman's scream dominated the other wails both in and out of the mansion, as the pain caused by the pulling force of the twins was intense. An irritated look soon appeared on the faces of the twins as they stared at the woman. They spat on her face, then placed a hand on her neck, and the sound of bone cracking rang out. After the bone crack, The woman's eyes shut closed and her heart stopped beating as well. However, the twins still didn't let go of her, and they continued to instill more pressure on her neck until they had gotten rid of her head. "Do you and Mason have some head fetish or what?" Suddenly Levi appeared beside Ethan and Edward. He stared at the corpse of the woman that had just been thrown away by the twins, and other bodies which were on the floor. "Well, yours is still much better than Mason," Levi said, recalling the scene of Mason pulling a man's head from his body and then chewing his head with a rather amused smile on his face. "Wanna bet?" When Ethan and Edward heard Levi, they raised an eyebrow and then stared at him, seemingly perplexed. "What are we betting on, and what are the stakes?" 500,000 points, Levi responded. "The base family is what we are betting on. I say the person with the highest death counts wins the 500,000 points. "How do I know I can trust you?" the twins asked, and in response, Levi raised his left hand slightly. "The M-Watch will count the number of people we kill in the mansion, and once this is over the winner gets the points," Levi said. "Let's make it 2 million points, then." "Why you?" The twins didn't linger around any longer, and after they spoke, they dashed to the second floor. Levi also didn't stay still. 2 million points were enormous even for him, so without any delay he quickly headed in the direction that was flocking with the members of the base family. Levi and the twins embarked on a task of their own. However, after a few minutes, the three of them paused. Levi glanced at the twins, then back at the figure who was putting on a white fitted suit, and a stern expression could be seen on his face. "You must be one of the 4 head guards in the mansion," Levi's voice rang out afterward. The aura which was brimming out of this man was different from the others he had encountered in the mansion, and this made Levi believe that he was someone of high authority. There was, however, no response from the man in a white suit, and instead, Levi was greeted by a smirk. "So, you're well aware of our existence in the mansion, and yet you dare barge into this place." As the man spoke, he crouched, then opened the briefcase. The file which was given to the students didn't only contain information about Clayton and the mansion that was written in there. They were also information regarding a few of the members and the guards. In the base family, after Clayton, the strongest member of the household weren't any of his relatives, and instead, it was the 4 head guards, and while Clayton took care of the public affairs, it was these 4 guards that worked behind the scene, and in the file given to the students, it was addressed that the 4 head guards weren't all that inferior to Clayton when it came to combat. "The only reason why you were able to even get this far is that the 4 of us are only just returning from a trip, but, now that we are here, I say it's time to clean the trash." The bald-haired man in a white fitted suit held a sickle that had a metal chain, then with a heavy iron weight at the end, as he stared at Levi and the twins. It wasn't only Levi and the twins that encountered the head guards. While Sylvia met with one of them at the compound of the mansion, Camille's group also faced one, and the last group met theirs. Bang, pfffftttt. Followed by that sound was one of the students vomiting a mouthful amount of blood. Savannah stood wiping the blood which was at the corner of her mouth, and a not-so-friendly smile could be seen on her face. "She is too strong." It was Camille that spoke as she stared at the middle-aged woman in front of them. The head guard which the 3 of them came across was a female. The woman was putting on a black long-sleeve short gown with a slit, and then a shiny pair of knee-high boots. A sinister smile could be seen on the woman's face as she went head-to-head with the 2 undead that Camille sent to her. However, the undead stood no chance against the woman, and a few minutes after they began exchanging blows, the woman destroyed the 2 of them. With her brown eyes staring at Camille, Savannah, and Devon who were standing several meters away, the woman said, "You're next." It wasn't even up to a minute, and the woman appeared in front of Camille. Her hands were clenched into a tight fist and without any delay, she delivered a full-force punch at Camille. While Camille was able to react very quickly to the woman's attack, she still suffered greatly from the woman's punch. The sound of her bones cracking resounded in the mansion, and before Camille could even get a grip of herself after that punch, the woman struck a kick at her. Oh, this is bad." Seeing how Camille was sent flying from the woman's attack, Devon's mouth opened slightly, As Camille lifted herself from the floor, the female head guard sneered, and said, "Why don't you tell me who sent you people here? Then I might choose to give you a quick death, rather than the torture. I intend to deliver on you before I kill you all." Savannah was about to use her powers on Camille when Camille stopped her. "There's no need for that," Camille said. "So, what it's going to be, a quick death, that won't involve torture of any kind, or would you like me to break you down in pieces by pieces? I'm going to rip off your fingernails, as well as toenails one after the other before I then slice off your fingers. After your hand comes to your body, I will cut, burn, your skin in the worst possible way." As the woman spoke, a devilish grin could be seen on her face. "Or better still, the both of you are quite decent, so I'm going to serve you to the dogs. Ha 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 ha, I'm certain you haven't seen dogs intoxicated with Viagra. Well, not to worry, you will get to experience one, and you too, boy." Devon was immediately soaked in sweats when he heard the woman. He staggered several steps backward instantly, staring at the woman with shock and panic written evidently on his face. As for Camille and Savannah, an expression full of disdain could be seen on their faces. Camille tightened her grip on the staff in her hand, and Savannah did the same to the twin dagger she was holding on to. "No, no, 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 no," Devon mumbled in a frightened voice. Devon had assumed that being in the same group with Camille and Savannah would assure his safety in the mansion. As Camille had a wide array of both offensive and defensive abilities, and with Savannah in the mix, Devon didn't think anything could go wrong. However, fate had something different planned for him. The woman flashed a smile when she saw the expression that the three of them had on their faces. She licked her lips and then said, "Whether you like it or not, we are going to find out who sent you to this place. You can as well be getting into our good books by saving us the time. Since you have made your choice, then I'm going to make mine." A second after the woman spoke, and she seemed to have disappeared from the mansion. Where is? Before Devon could complete those words, he got the answer to the question he wanted to ask, as Camille was sent flying once again. After Camille's body slammed against the wall of the mansion, Savannah followed as well. "Devon, go down." While Devon was left shaken, he still reacted fast when he heard Camille's voice and bent immediately. Bam! With his hands on his head, Devon shut his eyes closed when he heard that sound. After a few seconds passed, and he didn't experience any damage, his eyes twitched, and then he opened one of them. The moment Devon opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of Camille and Savannah, who were already standing beside him. However, the woman was still nowhere to be seen. "The power to render oneself unable to be seen," Camille said with a smirk appearing on her face. After Camille rang out, there was a sudden burst of laughter in the surrounding. "Not bad, girl, but that won't do you any good. Ha ha ha." It was the voice of the woman that sounded. Camille raised an eyebrow. She then took her off the necromancer's robe, and handed it over to Savannah, leaving only a black top and pants on. "I will take care of her," Camille said, and before Savannah could even speak, Camille took a step forward. "It's the time." It wasn't even up to a minute after Camille uttered those words, and two skeletons appeared beside her. The skeletons were holding onto a sword of their own, and as they stood in the mansion, they were exuding a deadly and suffocating aura. The four skeletons assumed a battle stance as they stared at the woman in front of them. "Attack," with that said, and the four skeletons launched themselves forward. While the woman from the base mansion had become invisible in the visible spectrum, the skeletons which Camille called open were capable of seeing her. "Why you?" The woman's perplexed voice soon rang out, as the skeleton had her surrounded. Battling these skeletons caused a lot of trouble for the woman, as they simply attack without holding anything back. The skeletons completely disregarded their bodies, and all they did was deliver waves of attacks. As the woman continued to ward off attacks from the four skeletons, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Camille leapt in the air and then swung her staff at full force at the woman, though she was still invisible to the naked eye. With the aid of the skeletons, Camille was able to pinpoint the location where the woman was. Cough. The sound of someone cough rang out, and a second after that cough came was blood appeared on the floor. As Devon and Savannah stared at the staff, They couldn't help but feel that it seemed to be pressed against something or perhaps someone. Meanwhile, a stern expression could still be seen on Camille's face. She withdrew the staff and then launched a flying kick forward. Bang! As the kick struck through the woman, not only was her body slammed against the wall but she was also rendered visible. The woman's face was covered in blood, and a couple of her teeth could be seen on the floor. "I won't spare you." The woman clenched her hands into a tight fist as she glared at Camille. Camille smirked when she heard the woman, and a second after she dashed forward along with the 4 skeletons. "I won't be so careless this time around." After the woman spoke, the woman became invisible once again. The 4 skeletons led the attack once the woman became invisible, and with their help, Camille was able to discern the location of the woman to an extent. "She is going to lose," Devon murmured. Savannah stared at Devon, before then saying, "How do you know that? And I thought you couldn't speak to women except if you are on alcohol," Savannah said with a tinge of mockery present in her voice. "You're not included. That only applies to some certain women," Devon responded. "And as for how I know, the woman is starting to get the upper hand. Within 30 minutes, I believe she should be able to get rid of those skeletons. Once those skeletons are gone, defeating Camille won't be difficult," Devon stated. Savannah's eyes twitched when she heard Devon. She stared at him, and her mouth opened slightly. "Why you? What do you mean by that only applies to some certain women?" Devon scratched his head. However, he chose to remain quiet. "Why you?" Savannah bit her lips hard. She stared at her chest, and she couldn't help but heave a deep breath. A few minutes passed, and the tables turned, just like Devon had said it will. As one of the skeletons got destroyed, the remaining 3 soon followed as well. Camille began moving backward from the woman's attack, and just when it seems like she was going to lose, a dark spiraling portal immediately appeared before them. "Aiden," Devon mumbled in a low voice. Devon and Savannah were, however, surprised as the person who appeared out of the portal wasn't Aiden, and a second after the person appeared the woman became visible immediately. "How?" The woman from the base family was about to speak when she was suddenly bombarded with all sorts of combos. She staggered several steps backward, and before she could even get a grip of herself, the person appeared before her once again, and this time around, she was met with an uppercut. Bam! It all happened so fast that the woman had no idea what was simply going on. After that girl with light brown eyes and no pupil appeared out of the portal, she found herself unable to utilize her powers. The woman lay powerless on the floor gasping heavily. She was about to raise her hand, when 2 figures appeared in front of her. "Why don't we let bygones be bygone?" As a staff drove through her left chest, blood oozed out from the woman's mouth. Her eyes soon shut closed, as her heart stopped beating. "Thank you, Elisa." Elisa nodded her head when she heard Camille. "Have you seen Raphael and Becky?" Elisa asked, and when Camille and the others shook their head, Elisa's voice rang out. "There is only one of the head guards left, and from what I've heard, he is the strongest among the 4 of them. I think Raphael and Becky encountered that guard." In one of the rooms in the mansion, a fierce battle was occurring between 3 students from the elite division, and the other figure from the base mansion. Boom! The room had been set ablaze since the moment the battle started, and it only continued to develop more, as the arts which were made by Becky were created just to explode. Suddenly, Becky took a step forward staring at Raphael and Alia who were standing side by side, and then said, "How do we defeat someone we can't even come in contact with, or even dare to come close to?" The lines between Becky's brows creased into 3 lines as she uttered those words. There was, however, no response from Raphael or Alia when the both of them heard her, and instead, they continued to stare at the green-haired man in front of them. The man who was putting on only a pair of brown pants stared at the 3 of them with a demonic grin on his face. Apart from his face which was covered in scars, a substance in a water solution that was bringing forth steam could also be seen all over his body. "If I didn't move very quickly, I would have lost an arm," Becky exclaimed as she stared at her hand that had almost been destroyed by the man. Those water solution which was all over the man's body weren't simply water solutions. Instead, they were corrosive acid. Luck could be said to be on Becky's side, as if that substance has made contact with her body, the burning sensation that the acid contained would have wrecked her. As one of the 4 head guards in the mansion, and for a matter of fact the strongest among the 4 of them, the man wasn't a force to be reckoned with. His ability to generate acid, bases, and other corrosive substances of various levels of corrosiveness made him very dangerous. Raphael, Aliur, and Becky had been facing the man for a while, and they were unable to land a successive hit on him. Instead, anytime they attacked the man, they were the ones who had to worry about themselves. Ugh! Suddenly, the man screamed. There was pain and sorrow evident in his scream, and as the 3 students stared at the man, their eyebrows furrowed. "I think he is about to go berserk." It was Becky's voice that rang out. "No, this can't be possible," the man said, then paused with his hands clenched into a tight fist. "They are dead," he murmured, a few seconds after, and the man's eyes turned bloodshot. He clenched his hand into a tight fist, and the acid which was all over his body seemed to have tripled in quantity. Oh, Becky muttered. Suddenly, Raphael, who was completely silent, heaved a deep breath. He stretched his hands out gently, and 3 blue gums could be seen on his palm. "Swallow this quickly," Raphael exclaimed as the man began dashing towards them. There was a bit of hesitation from both Alia and Becky when they heard Raphael. The 2 girls glanced at one another, before staring at Raphael and the gum in his hand. Raphael shook his head when he saw the look on the 2 of their faces. He then took one of the blue gums, and a second after he took one of the gums, the ladies took theirs as well. As the man got close to the 3 of them, he stretched both hands forward and unleashed an acid blast from his palms. Alia and Becky moved quickly when they saw the man move. They would rather walk into a pool of fire than to let that corrosive acid come in contact with them. But, while the 2 ladies moved away, Raphael stood in place, with his hands even folded across his chest. "What the hell?" Becky exclaimed as she stared at Raphael, who didn't move away. However, when the acid came in contact with Raphael, a magic occurred. It was simply so astonishing that it left Aliur, Becky, and even the man's mouths wide open, and shock was very much evident on their faces. As the acid landed on Raphael's body, there was no damage done, not even a scratch was caused by the acid, and even the clothes he was putting on were still very intact. It was almost as though the acid were absorbed when it came in touch with Raphael. "Why you?" The man's eyes twitched, and he staggered several steps backward. The shock which he had on his face was soon replaced by fear, and as he stared at Raphael, his body trembled violently. Alia crouched. She then placed her hand on the acid which was on their floor, and her mouth opened slightly. "That blue gum," Alia mumbled in a low voice. As she stood back up, she stared at Raphael and then said, "Those gums allowed our body to be immune to any acid," Alia stated. Seeing Raphael didn't deny the word which was spoken by Aliur, Becky raised an eyebrow. Really? Why did you just give it to us then?" Becky's voice rang out. She was, however, greeted by a sneer from Raphael. "You should be glad I didn't let the acid ravage you," Raphael thought. The gum which Raphael gave the 2 girls was one of his creations, and it was just like Alia said, the gum gave one immunity over acid. Raphael had created the gum after hearing about one sadistic metahuman who went about spewing acid all over people's bodies in the cities. It was later said that the metahuman was apprehended, but Raphael didn't dare take the risk. So, after gathering a couple of items, he was able to create the acid immunity gum. "He's running." Suddenly, Alia's voice rang out, as the man began fleeing for his life once his powers were of no threat any longer. While the man was indeed the strongest among the other guards, it was his powers that made him so. The ability to generate corrosive acid through his skin makes the metahuman extremely frightened of him, and because his control over the acid was excellent, he was able to pull off an extraordinary stunt. Raphael, Aliur, and Becky immediately dashed forward when they saw the man running crazily, as he knew his life depended on it. However, before he could cover much ground, Aliur appeared in front of him. The man was about to speak when he was suddenly held tightly in the neck by Aliur. He tried to break free from Aliur's grip, but his effort was all in vain. A second after, and Alia's gold iris immediately turned black. The man's whole eyes were about to turn black when his neck was snapped. Alia threw the man's body to another side. As her eyes returned to the usual color, she glanced at Raphael as if wanting to get an answer, but instead Raphael stared at her back for a few seconds before he moved away from her. "Hey everyone, they are here." It was Aiden that spoke, and about 4 students appeared in the room. Raphael, Alia, and Becky were 4 down, 1 more to go. Levi exclaimed with a smile on his face. It wasn't only Levi that had a smile on his face, the other student was also smiling as they stared at the man on the floor. "Sylvia and the rest are already heading towards Clayton floor. I say we hurry up," Aiden said, and immediately a portal appeared. Meanwhile, among the student who appeared, Elisa was also there, and while the rest took satisfaction in the death of the 4th head guard, she seemed to be engaged in a telepathic communication with Becky. Becky shook her head a few times and nodded her sometimes as well. When the dark portal was created, the both of them placed their conversation on hold and entered into the portal, right on time. It was about the same time that Raphael and the others came out of the portal that they encountered the students who were heading to Clayton's floor as well. "We have less than an hour before sunrise. Let's move fast." And without any delay, the students moved about Clayton's floor. They surveyed the whole area, and after checking through multiple rooms, they discerned someone's presence in one of the rooms. Bang! With a kick, and the door of the room was slammed open. Followed by that kick came the scream of a woman. Please, please don't kill me." It was none other than the big-breasted middle-aged woman. The woman was soaked in sweats, and as she stood, every part of her body was trembling in fear. She then went to her knees, and continued to beg for mercy. "Where is he? He?" The woman stammered when she heard that voice that was detached from any emotion whatsoever. He is gone." After a few more stuttering, the woman was able to get the word out of her mouth. A deep frown appeared on all of the faces when they heard the woman. One of them was about to speak when the bay window in the room suddenly shattered, and a thorp sound occurred. PFFFTTTT. The woman who was on her knees suddenly collapsed to the floor. Seeing the silver arrow that had passed through the woman's chest, the students shifted their gaze to the window, and a few seconds later, a figure holding onto a bow appeared in the window. "Really? You had to make an appearance?" Bane sneered when he saw Dwayne. Dwayne shrugged his shoulder when he heard Bane. "We have a problem," Dwayne said. "It's Alice and Mason." As Dwayne uttered that name, Savannah immediately dashed forward. "What happened to her?" There was worry present in Savannah's voice as she spoke. Dwayne glanced at Savannah and then said, "Alice and Mason came across Clayton before he ran away. The 2 of them should have called for backup, but they decided to fight with him, and..." Dwayne paused. "And what?" Exclamation mark. "Clayton was just too strong for them. Mason was able to flee, but Alice wasn't so lucky." Dwayne's mouth opened slightly. "Alice is dead." Thud. A second after Dwayne spoke, and Savannah stumbled to the ground. No, that can't be possible. Alice can't die, no." With tears oozing out of her eyes, Savannah's voice rang out, "We were going to be together, how?" Exclamation mark. Elisa and Becky came towards her, as she leaned onto them, and the cries continued. It was only after a few minutes that Savannah went soft a little, but the tears still continued to ooze out of her eyes. Can I see her?" Savannah said. "They are already bringing her over," Dwayne said, pointing outside. Savannah didn't remain on the floor, and she immediately went over to the window. Sobs. As she stared at the compound, she saw Alice being carried by Ethan. There was indeed no sign of Alice alive, and even as Ethan walked forward, there was a tinge of sorrow on his face. "I have to see if I can still save her." Savannah didn't wait any longer, and she rushed out of the room. However, it was even up to a minute after Savannah moved that a loud siren voice rang out in the surrounding. Oh, we can't stay here any longer. Aiden, what are you still waiting for?" Aiden's reaction was a little slow, but after he regained his composure, he created a portal immediately. "Sean, grab her, let's go." As the students in the room rushed into the portal, Sean used his supernatural speed to bring the rest into the portal, including Savannah. After everyone had entered into the portal vanished instantly, and a few seconds after the students left the base mansion, numerous vehicles barged into the mansion. As the students left the base mansion, they didn't return to the academy immediately, and instead, they appeared in the area where they were dropped off. And a second after they arrived there, a vortex appeared. Once the students saw the vortex, they immediately rushed into it. Aiden quick a portal to the support division. It wasn't even up to 5 seconds after the students were back at the academy alley that Melinda's loud voice rang out. Aiden's body shook and the hairs on his body stood erect when he saw the glares he was receiving from some of the students. He quickly stretched his hand forward, and a dark spiraling portal appeared before all of them. "Let's go." The students nodded their heads when they saw the portal, and without wasting any more time they rushed into the portal as though their lives depended on it, with of course Ethan in front. Perhaps if Alice had been harmed inside the academy, then the students might not even give a crap about it. But when it was a casualty that happened outside of the academy, they were all in for a serious problem from the academy. To the students in the academy's culture and principles were really weird. As while the academy had no problem with the students butchering one another, they found it infuriating when the killing was done by someone who wasn't from the academy. During missions assigned out of the academy, if any of the students were to suffer at the hands of an outsider, the academy wouldn't spare the other students. They would severely punish the other students, and this was why the students were on their best behavior with another, whenever they were on a mission. In the academy, they might loathe one another, and even go to the length of killing one another, but once they were out of the academy, the story was entirely different. They stood by one another, and even enemies became friends during that period. "You're not allowed into the building." The research and support division possessed the same defense mechanism as the tech division, and so Aiden wasn't able to breach into the building even if he wanted to. As the students appeared in front of the 41-story skyscraper, they were met by a blonde, petite woman who was putting on the academy uniform. "What do you mean, we are not allowed to enter the building? Are you blind or can't you see that we have someone we need to take to the support division?" Savannah exclaimed as the petite woman obstructed them from entering into the building. It wasn't only Savannah who was displeased by the woman's action, the other students were. And if it hadn't been for the figures they were seeing on her wristwatch, they would have blasted her away, but those numbers were simply so mighty that all they could do was express their discontent. The petite woman shrugged her shoulder when she heard Melinda and then said, "I don't care, you still can't enter the building." The woman said, "Why you?" The frown which was on the students' faces deepened when they heard the woman. "What will it take to have her inside the building?" Mason asked, and in response to Mason, the woman folded her hands across her chest. 5 million points should do, she responded with a rather amused smile on her face. "Bye, bitch," Xavier's voice rang out, and a second after he spoke he was sent flying back to the petite woman who simply flicked a finger at him. Xavier stood from the ground, wiping the blood which was around the corner of his lips, as he glared at the woman. As for the remaining students, they had a not-so-friendly smile on their faces. The students could naturally tell that the petite woman was asking for that exorbitant price because she knew that they need to enter the building. "All right, fine, we will pay." As the students agreed between themselves, Ethan's voice rang out. While they had no idea what the academy's punishment would be, from the stories they had about the academy's retribution, paying the woman 5 million points was a decent thing to do. However, a smirk appeared on the woman's face. "You know what, I have changed my mind." The woman paused. "Now I want 10 million points, the woman said, then let out demonic laughter afterward. How?" Before one of the students could complete those words, the petite woman waved her hand and said, knowing fully well she suffered those injuries outside of the academy, and with the academy principal involved, it would be ridiculous if I didn't demand that price. It's either 10 million points or nothing, and that's only the entry fee. I can't say what the others will demand." As the woman saw the expression the students had on, the smile on her face widened. I suggest you hurry up if you really want to save her because she isn't looking all that good," the woman said. "You know what, it's none of my business, you can as well let her die all because you don't want to pay that petty fee, and as for the academy punishment, that shouldn't be of a problem with that. From what I've heard, there are a few students who have survived it, who knows you all can be part of them. It should be your grades that you should be worried about because this is going to be an F." The students glared at the woman with rage written all over their faces. As they turned towards Alice who was in Ethan's hands, they couldn't help but clench their hands into a tight fist. Even though Alice had stopped breathing, and Savannah who had the power to restore anything wasn't able to bring Alice, the students had complete faith in the support division. Meanwhile, the person who experienced the most change was perhaps Raphael. Raphael hadn't really been fazed by the academy punishment. But when he heard those comments about the grades, his eyes twitched. Raphael moved toward Aiden and said, "What did she mean by this is going to be an F and what grade is she talking about?" Raphael asked curiously. "Oh, you didn't know," Aiden said, and seeing that dumbfounded look on Raphael's face, he raised an eyebrow before saying, "Those classes, training, missions, everything are accessed and are graded by the academy. I thought you knew. This is more or less like any other institute. Our cumulative grade point average is used to evaluate our academic performance, both on and off campus. It also determines our overall and type of metahuman we are likely to become. If God forbid anything is to happen to Alice apart from the academy punishment, we would also be getting an F in this assessment." Aiden heaved a deep breath. Raphael took a step back. Raphael uttered that word in a low voice. While he kept a neutral expression on his face, a sinking feeling arose in his chest. Raphael began to feel irritated and depressed as he thought about that sort of grade being recorded in his result. As the thought continued to linger in his mind, a deep frown naturally appeared on Raphael's face. Raphael bit his lips hard and clenched his hand into a tight fist. "So, what is it going to?" Before the petite woman could complete her word, a voice rang out, "We will pay it." A dumbfounded look appeared on the faces of the students when they heard Raphael. They stared at him wondering if they had been mistaking him, and he just didn't say those words. "I'm going to hand over 5 million points, the remaining 5 million shouldn't be a problem for you, right?" Raphael said with a sneer on his face. The students were still very much startled from what had just transpired, and it was only after a few seconds that a couple of them were able to regain comparison. "Sure, we will take care of the rest." It was Mason that spoke. Raphael then nodded his head and stared at the skyscraper in front of him. Thank you so much, Raphael, I'm forever indebted to you." Savannah wiped the tears on her face. As she stared at Raphael, Savannah really found it hard to believe that Raphael was willing to drop that amount for someone whom he had never had a second of interaction with. "Yes, Raphael, thanks a lot." Raphael's lips curved slightly when he heard Savannah. He, however, kept a straight face, and once the transfer was made, Raphael placed both hands into his pocket. "Not bad, kid." There was an expression full of mockery on the faces of the students when they heard the petite woman. And as for Raphael, he completely ignored her. "I couldn't care less. Hand the girl over, I will take her inside." "As I said, you still aren't allowed inside," the woman said. "You know what, one of you can follow me in, just one person." Seeing the unpleasant look the students had on, the woman spoke. As Savannah leapt forward, she and the petite woman walked into the building. "Is there something you're not telling us, Raphael?" Aiden asked. Raphael, however, shook his head. "I would have been disturbed," Raphael responded. There was a bewildered look on Aiden and Bane when they heard Raphael, but the two of them chose not to ask anything further, and instead remained quiet. Aiden and Bane had processed those words spoken by Raphael differently, assuming they had a deeper meaning, whereas Raphael's reply was in fact what he meant. For someone who was slightly obsessed and hyper-focused on his performances, as well as achievements, there's no way that getting an F on his assessment wouldn't bother him. A few minutes passed briefly, and suddenly two figures appeared in front of the students. The two of them were also putting on the academy uniform. but they had a gold-plated label on their blazers with the word Student Council written on it. Oh, this is bad. The two figures who had just appeared in front of the skyscraper were none other than the veiled woman who assigned them the mission, and a tall man with orange spiky hair. As the students saw the two of them, especially the tall spiky-haired man, they glanced at Raphael and then back at the man. The fact that you're standing in front of the Research and Support Division means that something happened in the base mansion, and also, it was 21 students who were sent out. How come there are only 19 here? Suddenly, the woman's voice rang out. The students, however, said nothing, as responding to the woman would do more harm than good to them. They all chose to remain quiet and continue to stare at the skyscraper with a rather hopeful look on their faces. As for Raphael, he had his eyes fixed on the tall, spiky-haired man in front of him, even though they had never met, and Raphael was very certain that this was the first time he was encountering this man. He could sense a tinge of killing intent coming from the man. "Do I know you?" After a few seconds, and Raphael could bear it any more, his voice rang out, and it wasn't in a friendly tone. The students shifted their gazes away from the skyscraper and had eyes fixed on Raphael and the tall man. The expression which they had on their faces was as though they had been expecting a situation like this to occur, and now that it did, they weren't surprised. Raphael, that is. Before Aidan could complete his words, the tall spiky-haired man walked in front of Raphael, stretched his hand forward, and then said, "I'm Vincent Walker, the elder brother of Richard and Adrian." There was a smile on Vincent's face as he uttered those words. It was like he didn't have any grudge against Raphael. Raphael, however, stared at Vincent. "It's nice meeting you, Vincent," Raphael responded, as he shook Vincent's hand. "I have heard a lot of things about you, Raphael. In a matter of weeks after you came to the academy you killed some certain people, and despite all you've done, 3 among the leading group in the academy consider you as a talent worth nurturing." The atmosphere became cold after Vince uttered those words, and even though he had a smile on his face, the students could as well tell that that wasn't a decent smile he had on. Meanwhile, Raphael's eyebrows furrowed when he heard Vincent. He seized Vincent from head to toe and then said, "It's the law of the jungle, and I might as well repay evil with evil," Raphael stated. Raphael might not have spoken the word directly, but everyone understood what he meant by repay evil with evil, and it brought a stupefied expression to each one of the faces. Raphael, Aidan, who was standing close to Raphael, pulled his cloth slightly as if telling him to stop talking, but he was instead greeted by a smirk appearing on Raphael. As Aidan saw how Raphael had responded, he stared at Bane, and the both of them couldn't help but gulp. The members of the Students' Council were not to be thrived with. Even teachers would choose to avoid them if necessary, and Vincent being able to become one of a member of the Students' Council was more than enough to address what sort of figure Vincent was in the academy. Apart from seniors and a couple of other groups on the campus, there were hardly any other students who would speak to Vincent in such a brazen manner, and especially not a Year 1 student. "Repay evil with evil." Vincent repeated the word that Raphael spoke to him, and suddenly an amused smile appeared on him. "So, you consider killing my brother as repaying evil with evil?" Vincent spoke in a cold voice, and in response, Raphael kept a straight face, and then said, "Who am I not to? I see no reason why someone who doesn't appreciate the beauty of life should be alive." If the atmosphere was already intense, then when Raphael uttered those words, the pressure certainly increased. Vincent had been able to control his emotion all this while with a smile on his face, but the moment he heard Raphael, and saw that expression full of mockery he had on him, Vincent's eyes twitched. With his hand clenched into a tight fist, Vincent glared at Raphael furiously, almost as though at any point, he was going to attack Raphael. However, after a few seconds, Vincent loosened his grip and a smile appeared on his face once again. "I don't know if I should see this as a wise thing to say or a foolish thing," Vincent said, "and also are you certain you have the strength to back up the words you had just said, because I'm really not someone you want to get in bad books with, at least not again." Raphael, however, sneered when he heard Vincent, You flatter yourself. I already consider you to be a pain in the ass, and truthfully, if it was left to me, you wouldn't even be alive, so it should be you who shouldn't get in my bad books," Raphael responded. From the moment Raphael and Vincent met, Vincent had already shown his discontent for Raphael with the killing intent, and so Raphael saw no reason to associate with him. Oh, this is really bad, really bad," Aiden mumbled in a low voice. It wasn't even up to a second after Raphael spoke, and dark particles began to emerge behind Vincent. Vincent's lips curved into a demonic grin, and as he took a step forward, his body began to exude a frightening amount of killing intent. Vincent's killing intent was locked on Raphael completely, and barely sensing a whiff of it had the other students staggering several steps backward. However, as the students were pushed backward, one figure walked to the front and stood right beside Raphael. The figure was a woman with long wavy white hair. It was none other than Aliur. Staring at Aliur, Raphael's had a neutral expression on his face. Though he was a little surprised by her, he still chose to act indifferent about it. As Vincent was about to take another step closer to Raphael, Raphael suddenly spoke, "If you take one more move, I will assume that you also don't value life. I will ask, was being alive not good enough?" Raphael said in a dark and low voice. Vincent raised an eyebrow, and he couldn't help but be startled by Raphael. It wasn't Raphael's words that made him stunned, but instead, it was that look that Raphael had on his face. To Vincent, those pair of blue eyes were unfathomably empty, devoid of all compassion, no humanity. No one should have eyes like that, no one. It wasn't only Vincent who felt that voice that was detached from all emotion and saw those eyes that seemed inhumane. Alia, who was standing beside Raphael, also saw him. However, she only glanced at him for a few seconds, and then kept a straight face. The uneasiness in the surrounding was broken when that petite woman from earlier appeared in front of them. Followed by the woman appearing, was also Savannah, coming out of the skyscraper with tears gushing out of her eyes. Even though the woman hadn't said anything, yet the students already had a bad premonition about it, and as they stared at the petite woman, an expression full of worry could be seen evidently on their faces. "We tried our possible best." The woman paused, "But, I'm afraid we weren't able to save her. Her soul had already left her body completely by the time you arrived here. There was nothing we could do to save her," the woman said. "Your friend is dead." As the students heard the woman, a couple of them stumbled to the ground. While some were genuinely sad about Alice's death, the others were worried about what her death inferred to them. "Can someone tell me what the hell is going on?" the woman from the student council exclaimed. There was, however, no response from the students, and the frown on the woman's face deepened. "I will learn about it myself then." With that said, and the woman raised her hand slightly, and she began to click on her wristwatch. A few seconds after the woman's action, and a holographic screen appeared in front of everyone. As the woman waved her hand, the screen began displaying all sorts of images that happened in the base mansion. And after a brief moment, she seemed to have arrived at the one she wanted, and as she tapped the wristwatch, what occurred in the mansion was being shown on the screen. "The academy planted a camera on us, but how? What the hell?" As the students watched the battle between Clayton, Mason, and Alice, they couldn't help but wonder where they were the whole time. Perhaps if Mason had been in his Titan form, then they might have figured it out, but he wasn't. The screen continued to display the battle between the three of them, and after a few minutes to get to the place whereby Clayton had defeated Mason, and then struck a blow at Alice. "You're all piece of shit. We gave you one single task to do, and you couldn't. In fact, one of your mates died because of your foolishness." Once Alice had dropped to the ground in the screen, a loud voice rang out. The woman kept on spewing on words to the students, and after a minute, she paused. "Prepare to hear from the disciplinary and execution committee very soon, because, if you can't take care of a petty base family, I don't know what to expect from you in the future." With that said, and the woman disappeared from the surrounding. "I will keep in touch with you, Raphael," Vincent said before he then disappeared. The other students glanced at one another for a few minutes before then heaving a deep breath. and moving forward. Some went towards Savannah, while others simply left. As for Raphael, he placed his hands on his chin. "So the F still stands," Raphael mumbled in a low voice. "Ha ha ha." Aliyah, who was still beside Raphael, chuckled when she heard him. Aliyah shook her head and then left. "Come on, Raphael, let's go." While the students had confirmed the death of Alice and were preparing for the disciplinary and execution committee, a different dilemma was occurring outside of the academy. In less than 2 hours after the students left the base mansion, the neighborhood got to learn about the annihilation which had just occurred. The scene was really disastrous, and the way the base family was wiped out overnight made some families and individuals in the estates terrified. They had always been boastful of the security of the estates, but now they couldn't help but wonder if living here was a good decision. We have even more breaking news to announce. On the #1 news channel in the world, Retro News 1, a male and female sat in front of a desk, with huge smiles on their faces. The both of them were putting on a classic grey suit, and after the woman got to hear information from the earbuds she had on, she paused and then stared at the camera in front of her. Ahem. As the man's voice rang out, the woman regained her composure. She, however, remained completely silent, holding the paper in her hand tightly. Ahem. I apologize. Suddenly, the woman's voice sounded. It has been brought to us that a family of icons has departed from us. It is our sadness to announce that the base family from the lower South Side is no more. According to our sources, the multimillionaire family had battled with a level 5 congenital disease, and last night they lost the battle. The doctor of the family had informed them that they had about 3 to 7 months left, and this was the 5th month. The government and Hero League are still working diligently to know the whole details of the diseases, and once it is being figured out, we all would be informed. That's going to be all for now, but we will be back. Retro News was the world's largest broadcasting news company, with viewership all over the globe, and once the woman announced the death of the base family, it was all over the place. The news covered every station and news channel around the globe, and everyone was talking about the catastrophe that befall the base family. In one of the underground bunkers, a woman sat on a luxurious chair with her leg placed on the other. The woman had snow-white skin, an oval face, pretty eyebrows, and a set of soft red lips that were bright red like cherries. The woman wore a long blue skirt, with long flaxen hair resting on her back. She had a graceful curve representing an S shape, with a big chest and firm butt. The ample bosom was especially attention-catching and eyeball-gripping, and along with a remarkable face, this was an exceptionally attractive woman. "Madame, it has been done." Standing beside the woman was a full-bearded man. The man had a reverent look on his face as he stared at the woman, and after speaking, he lowered his head. The woman, however, kept a straight face and continued to stare at the television in front of her. It was only after the news display switched to a soap commercial that the woman glanced at the full-bearded man. "Tell Retro News chairman that he has settled us, and next time he should better stay loyal to his wife." The woman suddenly spoke. "Yes, Ma," the man responded. Knock. A few seconds after, the door knocked, and a figure walked into the room. A tall man with short gold hair, blue eyes, brown tanned skin, a defined square jaw, and light facial hair. The man had a wedge-shaped scar on his right cheek, and as he walked into the room with a shiny gold suit on, a sneer could be seen on his face. "Madam Sonia, please help." It was even up to 5 seconds after the man entered the room, and another figure rushed into the room. It was a very bulky man with slicked black hair that rushed in, and as he entered the man went to the woman seating on the chair, and knelt on the ground immediately. "Please Madam Sonia, help me," the man pleaded. If perhaps any of the members of the base family were here, seeing this bulky man with slicked black hair, they would definitely recognize him, as the man was none other than the head and strongest metahuman in the household. Clayton placed his hand on the woman's leg, and he continued to plead, "Madam Sonia Tilda." However, a few seconds after Clayton held her leg, he was suddenly brought up by the man with gold hair. Clayton found himself unable to break out of the man's grip, While he himself was very bulky in front of this man, he was like a kid. "Why you?" Sonia dropped her other leg to the ground, and then stared at Clayton. "Let him go," the woman said. "Clayton, I want you to tell me everything that happened," she exclaimed. Clayton gulped, and without wasting any time, he began to inform the woman of all that happened in excruciating detail. Clayton didn't miss out on any detail, and he explained everything he glimpsed on in the mansion. Suddenly, the woman mumbled in low voice, "I want you to look into this VA," he mentioned. "Go through every branch, logo, company, industry, society. You might as well explore the whole world, but find out who these people are," the woman exclaimed. As the full-bearded man in the room heard the woman, he nodded his head very quickly and then walked out of the room. "Madam Sonia, what about Clayton?" abruptly paused, as the woman placed her index finger on her lips, and pointed at the television. Clayton's gaze swiftly went to the television, and his eyes twitched. "Welcome back everyone, I remain your host Lexi Jones, and this is my partner Jim Jones." Unlike earlier when Lexi and Jim had a grim look on their faces when they announced the death of the Bass family, this time around, a light smile could be seen on their faces. "We also have a guest that would enlighten us more on the Bass family. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, Dr. Wesley from Jersey Saint Hospital." It was Lexi's voice that rang out, and a second after she spoke, a slender man putting on a white lab coat appeared on the screen. The man shook Lexi and Jim's hands, before then seating on a chair close to them. "So, Dr. Wesley, we are being told that you are the family doctor of the Bass family, is that right?" Lexi asked, and receiving a nod from Wesley, she said, "Why don't you share more details on the Bass family?" Wesley heaved a deep breath. Staring at the screen he said, "I have been the Bass family doctor for over 20 years, and during my time there, I have learned a few things about the family. The members of the family are suffering from a congenital disease at level 6. Staring at the television, Clayton's body was soon soaked in sweats. How is this possible?" Clayton's body trembled violently, as he watched the family doctor spew out lies to the whole world. Clayton was well aware of the family situation, which was why before he died he made proper preparation. As Clayton heard Wesley, fear gripped him immediately. He stared at Sonia, and the man beside him, and he gulped. Clayton moved several steps backward. He glanced at Sonia, who was still staring at the television, and as he moved his gaze to the door, Clayton dashed immediately. "Where do you think you're running off to?" The man with the gold hair appeared in front of Clayton. Clayton stuttered, turning towards the woman. Clayton bit his lips hard, and then clenched his hand into a tight fist. "Sonia, is this how you will repay me?" It was as though Clayton had become someone else as he spoke in the furious tone. Clayton glared at the woman, and killing intent began seeping out of his body. "I have worked my butt off for his organization, Sonia. It was I who was sent to do the dirty deeds, while you monsters watch from behind the scene, and now that there was a screw-up, you want to clear all evidence of our acts." The louder Clayton's voice was, the more angrier he became, and when he couldn't bear it anymore, Clayton dashed towards the woman. The man at the door was about to make a move when Sonia raised her hand slightly. "Why?" Clayton appeared in front of Sonia, his voice rang out, and even though his hands were clenched into a tight fist, and his body was enveloped with killing intent, he was unable to lift his hand at Sonia. Sonia flashed a seductive smile when she heard Clayton. She trailed her finger across his face, and said, "Our organization is meant to be off the radar. No one should know what we do, Clayton. No one. We have no clue about the people who attacked your family, and as such we have to prepare for the unknown. You have already been marked, Clayton. And after all that we can't simply let you go." Clayton's body shook. "Why you?" He was about to speak when the woman suddenly captured his mouth. There was a blissful sensation when the woman's lips came in contact with Clayton, and as she wrapped her hands around his neck with her tongue exploring his mouth, Clayton found himself lost in the kiss. Tilda. Clayton shivered slightly at Sonia's touch and let out a soft moan, as she bit his lips. Bang! As Sonia separated herself, Clayton stumbled to the ground, Sonia stretched her hand, and tissue was placed on her palm. With a seductive smile still on her face, Sonia cleaned her mouth with the tissue, staring at Clayton, whose skin had become acrylic white, and also appeared to have lost all the flesh in his body. A disgusted expression could be seen on the gold-haired man. Have the editors work on Clayton and the other members' pictures. I want it to be flawless, and then distribute it to every media, Sonia said. I also need information about who those people are, and why they attacked the Base family. In the classroom of the Year 1 Elite Division, Edgar was standing in front of the students with his hands folded across his chest. The students were in their seats, and as they stared at Edgar, a perplexed expression could be seen on a couple of their faces. The look was from the fact that they had been in the class for over 30 minutes, and all Edgar did throughout the entire time was stare at them. What is going on? Is he perhaps on something? Xavier couldn't help but ask. As the longer it went on, the more creepy it became. Edward, who was beside him, shrugged his shoulder, and then glanced at his twin brother. Oh, yeah. He is definitely high on something, Ethan said with complete certainty. It wasn't only the male students who found Edgar's action unusual, the female also did. Edgar simply stood there with a smile on his face. He still didn't utter a word and continued to stare at each student one after the other. The sequences continued, and it was only after a few minutes that his voice rang out. Good morning everyone, I can see that you're all tired, so I'm going to make this quick, Edgar said. As you know, we still have a lot to cover up, but instead of going on with our fundamental psychology class, I will need you to open up with me about what happened last night. As Edgar spoke, the expression on the students' faces changed very quickly. A few of them stared at Savannah and then the empty chair beside her, before moving their gaze back to Edgar. Edgar, can we not talk about it? This is meant to be a psychology class, not a therapy session, so can we focus on that, and let's get things over with? Edgar was about to speak when Savannah's voice sounded. There was pain and a tinge of anger present in her voice, and as Edgar saw those pair of eyes that were still red, he shook his head. That's where you're wrong, Savannah, Edgar responded. Psychotherapy and grief counseling are also part of my work, Edgar said, and he then began walking towards Savannah. I read both of your reports, and just from a glance and the way the both of you act towards one another, I can tell that you and Alice had a deep connection. When you lose someone that close, it's of course natural to feel sad, and I'm certain that some of your friends might have told you to accept the loss and move. Well, while that's great advice, it isn't the best solution, Edgar said. To move on, you need to deal with your feelings first. Denial, anger, negotiation, and depression come before the last stage of healing, which is acceptance. It's only after we have gone through all these stages that you will be able to get back on your feet. Edgar was rather very gentle to Savannah, and every word he spoke was at a smooth pace. There was even a tinge of pity contained in his voice as he spoke. Savannah, I'm going to be factual with you at this point. If you're going to walk down this path, then you must be prepared to lose even more people. There are many more missions that you would be sent out on, and death might be inevitable. You can choose to opt out now, there is still time. So, Savannah, what's your decision? Edgar asked in a neutral tone. Every student in the classroom, including Raphael, had eyes on Edgar and Savannah. As Edgar spoke, Savannah bit her lips so hard that blood was oozing out, and both of her hands were clenched into a tight fist. What is it going to be, Savannah? Edgar repeated his earlier question. The atmosphere in the classroom was a little intense, as whether Savannah knew it or not. The answer she gave was going to determine her fate not only in the academy but in fact in the world. Savannah stuttered. The academy is my home, and I don't plan on ever leaving, Savannah exclaimed. Savannah's response brought a smile to Edgar and a few of the students' faces. Very good, Edgar said. The next few days would be spent working on your healing process, Edgar said. As for the rest of you, I would perform a test that would determine if the academy should consider you as a ticking bomb or not. Edgar then walked back to the whiteboard. He folded his hands across his chest and began to stare at the students one after the other. After a few minutes, he flashed a light smile and then said, "Raphael, Aliur, and Levi, the three of you are going to join Savannah in the session. Levi, I seem to recall you having the same sort of situation with Savannah, so you team up with her, and as for the both of you, see me in my office before the end of this week." Raphael's eyes twitched when he heard Edgar. He glanced at the girl who was a few meters away from him, and his lips curved slightly, while Raphael managed to keep a straight face. The truth was that at this moment he wanted nothing but to beat up Edgar. Raphael already knew that Edgar had this sort of weird theory about him right from the beginning, but never did he accept that he was going to take it this far. Among all the students in the classroom, Raphael found it bothering that the person Edgar had to set him up with was someone with whom he had no way of dealing it. "I will also keep in touch with the rest of you. If there's anything I discover, I will have you in my office," Edgar said. "Now that we have taken care of that, let's proceed. Come on in." A second after Edgar's voice rang out, a figure walked into the classroom. It was a girl with short, somewhat messy brown hair and brown eyes. She was putting on the academy uniform with a pair of glasses, and then 2 wristwatches were in both hands. As the girl entered the classroom, a frown could be seen on the faces of the students, most, especially Savannah. "This is Norma, your new classmate," Edgar stated. There was complete silence in the classroom with students staring at Norma and Edgar. It has only been less than 4 hours since Alice died, and the academy is already replacing her with someone else. "What the hell?" It was Jackson that spoke. Norma's mouth opened slightly when she heard Jackson. She seemed to want to speak, but after giving it a thought she chose not to, and instead flashed a light smile at the people staring at her. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Edgar's laughter rang out in the classroom. "I can as well inform you now, the academy is ruthless to them. Life goes on, and as a matter of fact, there are replacements in place for some of you. Norma, why don't you show them a bit of what you're capable of?" Edgar said. Norma immediately raised her hand slightly. She began to tap on the wristwatch in her right hand, and after a few seconds, she stopped. As she saw the stunned look on her classmates' faces, the smile on Norma's face widened. When Norma began clicking on the wristwatch, the TV screen in the room turned on a brief moment after. It wasn't the TV screen going on that made the students stunned. Instead, it was what was being displayed. "No way!" Xavier, Jackson, and Mason soon leapt from the seats, with shock written evidently on their face. There was a mini rocket project which the tech division was working on, and it was the rocket that was being shown on the TV screen. Once Norma's gave her wristwatch another tap, the rocket launched forward. "What the fuck?" The students who were near the rocket when it launched were blown several meters, and the rumbling that culminated in a deep flapping roar left the others shaken. "Who did this?" Exclamation mark. One of the students from the tech division exclaimed as she stared at the rocket. The female student was none other than Aurora, and seeing how furious she was, Raphael's lips curved into a smile. "How did you do that?" Xavier's eyes then glowed as he stared at the wristwatch Norma had on. "Settle down," Edgar exclaimed. Edgar stared at the students, who all had a very curious expression on their faces, before then saying, "Norma is an unnaturally skilled cyberpathic hacker who has the potential to breach through any system in the world. She can hack through any machinery and teleological system, also access any information that there is and was ever stored on the internet or technology at will, and can as well pull off any and every feat that involves tech." As everyone's eyes shifted towards Norma, a dumbfounded look could be seen on their faces. They seized her from head to toe, and their mouth opened slightly. The silence was, however, broken when a woman putting on a white skirt, black suit jacket, and pencil skirt with high black heels walked into the classroom. "So fast," Edgar said, staring at his watch. "I will see you all in the next class, and as for the people I told to come to my office, it best you do so, or else you can as well forget about the midterm test. Have a wonderful day." On Edgar's way out of the room, he gave Emily a slight bow and then walked out. "Where did we stop?" Emily wiped the whiteboard clean, and then placed her book on the desk. Meanwhile, The females in the classroom shook their heads as they saw how the boys were staring at Emily. Emily's bosom was something else, and as she placed her suit jacket on the desk, it was as though something was going to burst out of her clothes. "Hello," I said. "Where did we stop?" "Hey, what is wrong with you? Why did you turn it off?" Exclamation mark. Followed by that loud voice was the angry glare of two girls. Becky, who had just turned off the television, shrugged her shoulder when she saw how Melinda and Eliza stared at her. It was as though the two of them wanted to rip her into pieces, but Becky didn't seem to care as she kept a straight face. "This is meant to be our girls' night. All we have been doing the whole time is watching television. I'm already quite bored, so let's do something else," Becky stated. Melinda and Eliza glanced at one another before one of them said, "What do you mean by we have been watching television the whole time? Didn't we finish playing games?" Melinda pointed at the Monopoly board which was on the floor. "Turn on the television. I just used all the points I had to subscribe to Webflix this evening, and you know, this movie 735 Day is one of the talked about movies right now. If I don't watch it now, I'm going to be hearing about the spoilers, which is something I want to avoid. Better still, I want to be the one telling the spoilers. So, turn on the television," Melinda yelled. None of the words which were spoken by Melinda seemed to have any effect on Becky, and instead of turning off the television as Melinda wanted, Becky stood and even unplugged the television input from the socket. "Becky, how dare you?" Melinda was about to launch herself at Becky when Becky's voice rang out. "Eliza, what are you going to do about Raphael and Alia?" Melinda abruptly paused, and then turned towards Eliza. Eliza was on the chair knitting when she heard Becky. She, however, raised her head, staring at the two girls, and was about to speak when the door of the room was pushed open. "What about Raphael?" Exclamation mark. The three girls in the room immediately shifted their gazes towards the person who had just walked into the room. "Oh, it's this person that Eliza is really into," but another girl is advancing towards him. "It is kind of really complicated because Eliza hasn't told him about how she feels." "And why are you just coming now?" Becky said. "It's almost 11 o'clock. Do all members of the tech division act this way, or is it just you, Aurora?" Aurora flashed a light smile when she heard Becky. "I was a little busy. You know the rocket I have been working on, someone tampered with it. It was really annoying as we had to start from scratch." Seeing the expression on the three girls' faces, Aurora raised an eyebrow. "Anyway, forget about it. So, who is this person that Eliza has a crush on, and what does he have to do with Raphael?" As Aurora spoke, her mouth opened slightly. "Wait, Raphael? Is that the name of the person Eliza has a crush on?" Aurora asked in a serious tone. Becky and Melinda nodded their head when they heard Aurora. "Yes. You know we have been telling Eliza to tell him how she feels about him all this while, but she is shy about it. I also keep telling her that there's no way he would reject her. Eliza is both attractive and beautiful. While her breasts might not be her strongest area, those buttocks are on another level," Becky said, staring at Eliza. "They bounce with each other every movement. Tell me who can possibly resist that, Becky?" Eliza glared at Becky, who kept on seizing her from head to toe, and even though they had pretty much seen each other naked numerous times, Eliza couldn't help but get the feeling that Becky wanted to strip her down. "Come on, don't act like you don't know you have large buttocks. Everyone is always looking at them whenever you walk by." "Melinda, is she really joking, or does she not know?" Becky said. "Ha ha 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 ha. I'm sure she knows." Becky, "Can the both of keeping shut?" Suddenly, Aurora's voice rang out. "There are two Raphael in the academy, one in the norms division, and the other in the elite division. Which one are you talking about?" "The one in the elite division, of course," Becky responded. "What could possibly make you think that we are talking about the one in the norms division?" As Becky rolled her eyes at Aurora, Melinda shook her head and a very much offended expression could be seen on her face. Aurora, however, shifted her gaze away from the two of them, and then leapt towards Eliza. "Eliza, no, 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 there's no way you can have a crush or even try to tell him how you feel about him." There was a bewildered expression on Elisa's face when she heard Aurora. "Trust me that Raphael is not worth it. He is nothing but a proud, ignorant, self-centered, narcissist person," Aurora exclaimed. "What do you mean? Have the both of you met before?" Melinda asked. Aurora nodded her head and then began to recount the details of what happened between her and Raphael. She started from scratch, and only excluded that other identity about him which she figured out. As for the rest of it, Aurora informed the girls about everything that occurred. "So you see, why I say you can't be with someone like that," Aurora exclaimed. That's quite some story you have right there, Aurora," Melinda said, "but Raphael doesn't behave like that. He seems even friendly." "Yes, Aurora, he even saved both I and Alia in the mansion. If he was self-centered, he could have let us be buried in acid, but he didn't. As for his proud nature, I can't really say much about that, but even if he is proud, he actually is entitled to be that way," Becky said, and seeing how Melinda, Aurora, and Elisa were staring at her, her lips curved slightly. "I mean, he is very handsome, powerful, his powers are extraordinary, and to top that off, he is also a tech genius. It would be weird if he doesn't have an arrogant side in him." Aurora's eyes twitched when she heard Becky. "Why you?" Aurora stuttered. "Elisa, you listen to me. Raphael isn't a good person. You deserve someone better than that snobbish dude," Aurora stated. Elisa stared at Aurora for a few seconds before moving her gaze towards Melinda and Becky. "What do the both of you think?" Elisa asked. "Raphael actually doesn't seem like that sort of person, but it might probably be because I'm into him, so I'm unable to see all that." "What do you think about him?" Elisa repeated her early question. "You like him, don't you? So, go for it," Becky replied straight away. "I was with him in the mansion, the whole time, and I couldn't find any complaint about him. And to be sincere, the only reason I think Aurora dislikes him is that Raphael won some award before her. You know those dumbos in the tech division are no match for her, but Raphael is," Becky said. "No, there's no way that jerk is better than me." A second after, and Aurora's voice rang out, "I didn't say he is better, I only said you see him as a threat to your #1 throne. The two of you should keep shut." Melinda's loud voice reverberated the whole room. As Aurora and Becky became quiet, Melinda stared at Elisa. "Don't mind the two of them, Elisa. It all goes down to what you want. None of us is close with Raphael, so we really don't know much about him. It's down to you, like I said. You can either take more time to get to know him, or you can tell him about your feelings. There are of course advantages and disadvantages to it," Melinda said. Elisa heaved a deep breath. "I still don't know if he even likes me. What if he says no? Who are you kidding? With an ass like that, there's no way he wouldn't like you, and even if he doesn't, that would mean that he is either into guys, or he is simply an idiot," Becky declared. Melinda shook her head. "You can't know if you don't try. After everything I have told you, I can't believe you're still thinking of confessing how you feel to him." Aurora paused. "What is wrong with you? Isn't that because you're only putting your own feelings into consideration and not Elisa's feelings?" Becky said with a sneer on her face. "SHHH." Aurora gave Becky the finger. "Oh yes, I remember. What about this? I saw a couple of women in Raphael's room the other day. They were all yelling at him, calling him all sorts of names. One of them included pervert. Yes, now, do you think I'm only putting my feelings into consideration? Not only is he proud and self-centered, he is also a pervert." When Elisa, Melinda, and Becky heard Aurora, a perplexed expression couldn't help but appear on their faces. The three of them glanced at one another, before then staring at Aurora. "Aurora?" "Yes. What were you doing in Raphael's room in the first place?" I, Aurora stammered, and her eyes twitched when she saw how the three of them were staring at her. That's not the main point. What matters is what those girls were saying," Aurora said. "Nope. What were you doing in the room, Aurora?" Melinda asked, folding her hands across her chest. As Aurora stared at the three of them, she heaved a deep breath. "It's not what you think. I went there to confront him about something," Aurora said, and seeing the expression on their faces, She shook her head. Fine, Elisa, tell him about how you feel, but whatever happens, I'm going to be here to tell you that I told you so. Duh, Becky exclaimed. So Elisa, what are you going to do about Raphael and Aliur, especially now that they will be having a private session with Edgar? Elisa, however, shrugged her shoulder. Nothing, even if we are to end up together, I can't always be with him all the time. Elisa said, let's talk about something else. This is meant to be girls' night, not talking about Raphael's night. It was Aurora that spoke. What movies were you all watching? Aurora asked as Melinda went to turn on the television. 765 days, really? There was excitement written all over Aurora's face. I have been dying to watch that movie, you know, after watching part 1 where the woman was kidnapped. I just couldn't wait for more. As the rooster let out another cry, the artistic golden sun emerged, and it soon turned the dark black sky into a bright blue sky. Not again, Aiden exclaimed as he stared at his wristwatch. I can't believe that we are always the first to leave class, and at the same time we are always the last to get there. Aiden shook his head. Bane, who was on the couch, chuckled when he heard Aiden. We are awesome, ain't that right? Bane said, what's the rush? Our class is still till evening, and also the person who always comes out late is Raphael. Doesn't he get bored? I mean, he is always in the room all the time, and when it's time to leave, it's almost as if he still hesitates. Devon spoke, staring at the door. Bane and Aiden also moved their gaze to the door, and they couldn't help but agree with the word which had just been said by Devon. Maybe he has a woman locked inside the room with him, or else I see no reason why someone would like staying indoors that much, Bane muttered, then nodded his head. Creak. A few seconds after Bane's voice rang out, and the room in which they had all been staring at was open, and a figure stepped out of the room. Are you guys ready? Raphael asked, as soon as he stepped out of the room. Raphael was putting on a white shirt, a blue blazer, blue pants, and a long tie. His black pair of shoes were shining more than usual, and as for his brown hair, Raphael had kept it just the way he liked it. Did you create some gadget for ironing or smoothing your uniform, Raphael? Bane couldn't help but ask as he stared at the academy uniform that Raphael had on, and the one he was putting on. The difference between the both of them was miles apart, and regardless of how many times Bane compared the both of their uniforms, he couldn't help but feel as though he were cheated. In something like that, Raphael responded, the materials which the academy used is only so-so. I didn't like it all that much, so I made. Raphael hadn't even spoken finished when Bane and Aiden leapt towards him. A different kind of glow could then be seen on their faces. The textures are really different, or what do you think, Aiden? As the two of them appeared in front of Raphael, Bane gently touched Raphael's blazer. Yes, and this looks even more beautiful, Aiden replied. Raphael took a step back, as he saw the look the both of them had in their eyes. As they stared at his uniform, he could also see the glow in their eyes, and after giving it a thought he said, I also made 5 more, if you like it, I can give. Yes, what are we still waiting for? Raphael went back into the room, and he brought 3 clothes out. He passed them to the 3 of them, before then saying, I used my measurements, so it might not be your exact size. I highly doubt that, Bane responded, and he soon began to change in the living room. Even though Devon had remained silent the whole time, Raphael had noticed the grin on his face, when he said that he had others that he created, and when he handed Devon the uniform, the smile on his face widened. A few minutes later, and the 3 of them were done changing. Thank you, Raphael, this is really, really good, Aiden said as he seized himself from head to toe. Yeah, thanks, man. Raphael simply flashed a smile, when he heard the 3 of them. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Bane burst into laughter. His laughter traveled across the room, and perhaps even the whole dormitory, as he laughed really hard. As Bane placed his hands into his pocket, a crazy smile crawled on his face. With this and our awesomeness, we will own this academy. Mothers, lock up your daughters. Daughters, lock up your attractive mothers. Sexy teachers, get ready to be own. Female students, Daddy is coming home, anytime. a girl wants to get back at her ex-boyfriend, we will be there. Anytime a girl needs protection and wants to solve her academy issues, we will be there, Bane said. Anytime a MILF is. Bane paused as he looked around the room, only to realize that there was no one there with him any longer. As he raised his head, he saw the dark spiraling which was beginning to fade, and without wasting any time, he rushed into it. So, have you decided, which of the clubs are we joining? As Raphael, Aiden, and Devon got to the alley, Aiden's voice rang out. Devon placed his hands on his chin, as he stared at all the students in the alley, and while Devon continued to ponder, Raphael was left stunned when he arrived at this side of the alley. The area which Raphael had visited the last time was more like draining, but this place was different. In fact, Raphael wouldn't have believed that he was in the alley if it wasn't because of the tower he was gazing at, and also because it was written on the timetable that today's activities were in the alley. There was no burial ground in this area, and neither were there any training equipment or training grounds. Instead, there were several buildings in this place. Is joining any of the clubs compulsory? Raphael asked. No, Devon responded. Does it affect Akbar? No. Hold up. I know you're thinking, what the hell are you doing here then? Aiden said, and seeing Raphael nodding his head, he shook his head. The academy doesn't make joining clubs compulsory, but the Students' Council and those other two consider it to be very important. You mean the Cabal? And who is the other group? A second after Raphael spoke, and Bane appeared in front of them, with a slight frown on his face. Why didn't you wait for me? Bane exclaimed. Oh, sweet heaven. As a tall girl with black hair styled in hime-cut, burgundy eyes, with pink glossed lips walked by the four of them, Bane's eyes twitched. I'm about to put my awesomeness into the act. I say it's time to make history. Sigh, when is he ever going to learn? Seeing how Bane walked majestically towards the girl, Devon exclaimed. Devon was, however, greeted by a sneer from Aiden. You're just saying that because you can't talk to her, Devon said, then shook his head. She is actually not my type. Ha 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 ha. Come on, who are you kidding? I can't believe you even have a type. You have been single since like forever, so how can you still have a type? Aiden jested. I'm serious. Also, I'm single by choice. We both know that, Devon said with an expression of pride on his face. Ha 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 ha. It wasn't only Aiden who busted into laughter. Even Raphael gave a slight chuckle when he heard Devon. What do you mean you're single by choice, and which choice do you have? Ever since I have known, apart from your sister and aunt, I haven't seen you with any other girl, Aiden said. You can't understand, it's more like an eye flirting with me and the ladies. I have gotten pretty replies, including the rolling of eyes, the dirty looks, and some other kinds. Raphael raised an eyebrow when he heard Devon. Does any of those replies also include the girl running away from you? He asked. They don't usually run, sometimes they just leave the area, and I never see them again. Devon replied innocently. Ha 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 ha. Aiden laughed so hard that tears gathered around his eyes. Oh, my God, buddy, you're intelligent in all other areas, but women just aren't your thing, Aiden muttered as he tried to get a grip of himself, from someone who got rejected 1,000 times by a girl. The expression on Aiden's face changed when he heard Devon, and he said, for your correction, it's just 998 times. 98, I thought it was 997, Devon mumbled. Shit, you went to ask her out again. Ha 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 ha, I keep telling you to let this girl go. Which girl? It's this girl that Aiden has been interested in for a very long time, Devon said. Is something wrong with your eye? Why are you looking at me that way? Aiden heaved a deep breath, and then shook his head. You know what, forget about it. Raphael, you were asking about the last group that runs the academy. You have already met members of the Students' Council, and also the Cabal. The last group referred to themselves as Bratva, the Students' Council, the Cabal, and the Bratvas, Aiden said. Bratva? Isn't that like some mafia gang or something? Raphael said, and as he spoke, he found everyone in the surroundings staring at him. They all stopped everything they were doing, and instead had eyes on them. Raphael's eyebrows furrowed. He could see the grim look some of them had on their faces, as well as an expression of fear and panic. It was almost as if that word he had called out was some sort of forbidden word in the academy. It's fine, I was merely informing him about them, Aiden said, and as the students went on with what they were holding, Aiden said, I should tell you that among the three of them, the Bratvas are the most feared and also respected. So, who is the strongest among them? Raphael asked with a smile on his face. I actually can't say which one, since the three of them haven't gone all out before. It's mostly just confrontation, that's all, Aiden said, but the Braves are the most feared and respected, the Cabals are the most ruthless and dangerous, and the Students' Council are the ones with the most authority. I will tell you more about them later. It's time to choose the clubs we will be joining, Aiden muttered. I will tell you more about them later. It's time to choose the clubs we will be joining, Aiden muttered. Raphael had to put his interest in the three groups on hold, as two students appeared in front of them. It was a bald male student and a brunette female of petite posture. As the two of them handed them a paper, Raphael, Devon, and Aiden collected the paper and began to access the content in it. You know what, screw it, I'm going to be joining the Cultured Society, Aiden exclaimed with a smile on his face. When Devon heard Aiden, he glanced at Aiden, shaking his head, then burying his head back into the paper. Same goes for me, I will also be joining the Cultured Society, Devon said. Ha ha ha, Aiden couldn't help but chuckle when Devon spoke. He stared at the petite girl in front of him, and he had to place his hand on his mouth, or else he was going to laugh really hard. Raphael also seized the girl from head to toe with a poker face and then continued to review the clubs which were on the paper. As it turns out, there were numerous clubs and societies in the academy, but among the various numbers, there were only 9 of them that were acknowledged by the academy and the 3 groups. The Board Club, Cultured Society, Student Council Club, Gambling Society, Gossip Club, Body Improvement Club, Profane Society, Nerd Club, and lastly the Rightist Club. It wasn't only the names of the clubs and societies that were written on the paper which was handed over to Raphael, but also what the club and society entitled. And as Raphael read about each club and society, he couldn't help but find himself intrigued. The Cultured Society that Devon and Aiden chose involved teaching and then using the art of casual conversation and flirtation to entertain anyone. The Cultured Society enjoys the flair and inherent campiness of the atmosphere and uses it to engage with the various girls of the academy. The Gambling Society seems rather decent, Raphael mumbled in a low voice. As Devon and Aiden heard Raphael, the smile on their faces vanished immediately, and as the both of them glanced at one another, they gulped. The 2 students also raised an eyebrow when they heard Raphael, but they were quick to change their expressions. The club and societies were one of the ways to earn points in the academy, and among all of them, it was the gambling societies that fetched the most point. Raphael, the gambling society isn't as decent as you think it is. Seeing the smile that appeared on Raphael's face, Aiden's voice rang out. Though the gambling society is the richest among all the clubs and societies, it isn't all that glitters that gold. The members of the gambling society are compulsive gamblers, fiends who would do anything, and I mean anything, to win. Once you join, there's no coming back. There's a strict hierarchy in there, and a system that governs all of them. It is basically impossible to win anything significant from them because they are monsters in the society. Those who lose consecutively and are unable to repay their debts are labeled as academy slaves, and they are controlled by the gambling societies for the rest of their lives. And trust me, that's not something you would want. Devon's eyebrows furrowed, when he saw the look on Raphael's face. It was obvious that he didn't hold any of the warnings Aiden had spoken to him in high regard. Heaving a deep breath he said, Yes Raphael, to the gambling society, betting and gambling is a way of life. They also don't play fair, and most of the members in the society are from the cabal, so, even when they cheat, no one dares question them, Devon said with a disgusted expression on his face. Devon and Aiden couldn't help but be alarmed, as the smile on Raphael's face widened when he heard them. The two of them were seriously looking into contacting Serena when Raphael's voice rang out. "I didn't say I was joining them, I said they seemed decent," Raphael said, "but sincerely, I'm really fascinated by the idea, it's just that I wouldn't like to be tied down." The gambling society had a policy of membership for life. Once a student joined the society, they were going to remain there forever. "Ugh. I will also be joining the cultured society." As the petite girl ticked Raphael's name and then left, a smile could be seen on Aiden's face. Devon scratched his head. "This is really going to be insane," Devon muttered. "I thought you were going to join the student council club." Aiden paused. "Hold up, Raphael, did you join the cultured society because of the two of us?" Aiden asked, and in response, Raphael nodded his head. "It's only right since the both of you are the only people I'm familiar with within the academy. And why would you think I would choose the student council club?" "Because of Serena," Aiden replied. "Oh," Raphael's opened slightly. "Nope, that would just make her think I accepted her invitation to the council." The student council club was perhaps the club with the most powerful members among all of them. Their members were a group of elite students in the academy, with the main goal being to become one of the leaders and core members of the student council. "Wait, Serena asked you to become a member of the student council?" Aiden asked in a surprised tone, and as Raphael nodded his head, his body shook. Holy shit. It wasn't only Aiden who was astonished, Devon was also left astounded. Devon suddenly raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean that would make her think you accepted her offer?" Devon said, then paused. "You didn't tell her no, did you?" Raphael could see the expression on Devon and Aiden's faces. He flashed a light smile, before then nodding his head. "Of course I did. I'm really not interested in things like this," Raphael answered. "What do you mean you're not interested?" Aiden exclaimed. "The Students' Council usually doesn't invite any students to join them. It's a status that is acquired from birth. For Serena to invite you, it must also mean that the members of the Student Council all think of you in high regards." "Raphael, do you know what means? You will access to all areas in the academy, as well as the support from the Student Council." "Still not interested," Raphael said. Sigh. Raphael raised his head, and seeing Bane, who was still talking to the black-haired girl, he said, "Which club is Bane joining?" "That damn profane society," Devon said with a frown on his face. "If the gambling society was the home of gamblers, the rightest club for women who wanted to stand against the injustice of societies, the nerd club for the geeks in the academy, then the profane society was for the miscreants. Among the clubs in the academy, the profane society was the most detested among them all. To the students, the members of the society were indisciplined, cruel, and some of the most atrocious acts in history were committed by the profane society. Ha ha ha, I think that's all. Since our class is still evening, I'm going back to the dormitory," Raphael said. Devon and Aiden nodded their heads when they heard Raphael, and Aiden was about to create a portal when suddenly someone held his hand tightly. "Why you?" As the person let go of Aiden's hand, Aiden glared at her, and so did Raphael, and Devon. Raphael had a perplexed look on his face because he could feel the woman's eyes on him. "If it isn't Raphael, Queen, you know I have been trying to get in touch with you all this while, but you have always been hiding in that dormitory of yours," the woman said. "Now that you're here, I think we have topics to talk about." Staring at the very light-skinned girl of average height with long pink hair that was parted into two ponytail styles, a frown appeared on Raphael's face. "Do I know you?" Raphael asked in a not-so-friendly tone. They were two girls that approached Raphael, Aiden, and Devon. Both of them were light-skinned, but while the one that spoke had long pink hair, the other had blonde hair that was also styled in two ponytails. "You don't know us, but we know you," it was the girl with blonde hair that spoke. "You see, Raphael, it's like a boomerang, it always comes back to you. You could have killed anyone in the academy, and we wouldn't have cared. For instance," the girl stretched her hand forward, and a set of chains emerged from her palm. As the chain appeared, it flew towards one of the students in the area, then wrapped around the male students, and with a slight movement, the student's neck was snapped off his body. Those who were nearby stared at the male students for a few seconds before then moving their gaze away from him. The point is, you could have killed anyone in the academy, and we wouldn't have cared, but you had to target someone who was close to us. When Raphael heard the girl, the lines between his eyebrows creased into 3 lines. "You mean Adrian?" Exclamation mark. The girls nodded their heads and a deep frown could be seen on their faces. While it's true that life is of insignificant in this place, there are still some people that you need to get permission for before you or anyone can lay hands on. And Adrian is one of them. The girls took a step closer to Raphael. "You crossed a line, Raphael, and it's only fit that you suffer a punishment matching that of Adrian." Raphael folded his hands across his chest as he stared at the girls. "Oh, I see," Raphael said, "so that means that the both of you are here to kill me, isn't it?" A bone-chilling smile hung on Raphael's face afterward. "Truthfully, we dare not. The Students' Council, the Cabal, and the Bratvas have warned everyone not to act against you, but don't you think that a cowardice act? A man such as yourself should have the power to protect himself and not have to hide behind someone or some group." "Well, except that as if you're even a man." There was a tinge of mockery in the woman's voice as she spoke. Raphael simply smiled. If the woman had perhaps assumed that those words were going to get to him, then she was completely wrong. "So what do you say, Raphael? Why don't we end this conflict once and for all in a life-and-death battle? That way you would at least prove that you have some balls, and others might learn that you aren't a coward after all." The pink-haired woman said, "Yes, or don't you have any balls down there?" The smile still remained on Raphael's face as he stared at the 2 girls. "Raphael, when I say go, you rush into the portal. We will head straight to the administration office, and I'm certain they won't be able to do anything there." Aiden mumbled as he moved close to Raphael. Aiden was about to stretch his hand when Raphael shook his head. "There won't be any need for that," Raphael responded. "What are your names?" The women's eyes twitched when they heard Raphael's question. "I'm Nancy and this is Sharon," the pinky-haired woman said with a rather confused expression on her face. "Why do you ask?" Sharon asked. "It's a habit of mine to want to know the names of the people I send to their grave." Raphael simply stretched his hand toward him, and his gloves were removed by Gus, who then went to sit on Devon's head. "Ha ha 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 ha, you do have some balls after all." The women weren't offended by Raphael, and instead they seemed delighted that he was willing to fight them. "Raphael, you can't really be thinking of facing these 2, right?" Aiden asked, and seeing that smile Raphael had on their face, he shook his head. "No, no, no, that's like having a death wish. This will not be like your fight with Adrian. The both of them are way more stronger, and in case you didn't notice they are Year 3 students," Aiden exclaimed. There was a bit of change in the expression on Raphael's face when he heard Aiden, because if they were truly Year 3 students, then it was going to be, in fact, very dangerous. "So they are A-rank meta-human," Raphael mumbled. Aiden nodded his head immediately. "Not only that, but I also speculate that their power rank is of 6 figures. There was fear evident in Aiden's voice as he spoke, because the power possessed by a meta-human of 6 figures power rank was more than any of them could handle. A stern look appeared on Raphael's face, and when he heard the woman's voice, his eyebrows furrowed. "I hope you're not thinking of changing your mind just because your friend told you about us," Nancy said. "That would really give everyone the impression that you're nothing but a coward." Raphael still didn't allow any of the women's words to get to him, and he continued to ponder how best it was to handle this decision. Raphael wasn't basing his judgment on his superpowers, but instead, it was on the gadget with him. Is it worth it? Raphael thought. Raphael had no fear whatsoever for these women, even after getting to know their ranks, but he had to ask himself if revealing all that much was worth it. And after giving it a deep thought, Raphael shook his head. If he was pushed to the back of the wall, then he would be forced to reveal his hands, but since they were still an option, he was going to take it. "I'm going." Before Raphael could complete his words, a voice rang out in the alley. "Ha ha 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 ha." Followed by that demonic laughter was a young man of pearly white skin appearing in front of Nancy and Sharon. The man was rather lean with black, lank, straggly hair and maniacal red eyes. He was wearing the academy uniform and his hands were placed inside his pocket. As the young man stood in front of Nancy and Sharon, a sinister smile could be seen on his face. "Does the Cabal warning mean nothing to you?" While the man spoke in a soft tone, and a voice that didn't contain the slightest bit of killing intent. When Sharon and Nancy heard the man, they gulped and beads of sweat could be seen all over their forehead. I have said it several times, Raphael shouldn't be touched. I have said it several times, he shouldn't be touched," the man exclaimed. Nancy and Sharon glanced at one another, and without wasting any more time, the both of them fled. They mustered all the strength in their body and ran as though their lives depended on it. However, both of them hadn't covered much ground when the man appeared in front of them. "Why you?" Nancy stuttered. "Who is that?" Raphael asked as he stared at the young man a few meters away from him. Aiden heaved a deep breath. When he heard Raphael, he was about to respond when a scream reverberated the whole surrounding. Ugh! It was Nancy that screamed as a few seconds after the man appeared in front of her. His teeth became long and pointy, and with a movement from the man, he struck his fangs on her neck. The man drove his fangs all the way in, and after finding his preferable spot, he increased his biting force, and then ripped the flesh of the region out. Once the flesh was out, the tissues, blood vessels, and cells were out in the open. The man devilishly licked his lips and soon began to dine on Nancy's meat as though it were some sort of delicacy. Before the tight grip of the pale young man, Nancy found herself incapable of moving, but she still managed to utter a few words out of her mouth. Paul, please Tilda." Nancy's plead didn't seem to mean anything to the pale young man as he continued to feast heavily on her neck. The man chewed every piece of flesh that came his way and savored in the taste of Nancy's blood heavily. The sound of bones cracking soon sounded from Nancy's body, as when the man came across one of her neck bones, he gnawed on it right away. Despite Nancy's screams and the blood which was oozing out of her neck, there was no remorse or pity from the man. He held her body tight and buried his fangs deep into her. Meanwhile, Sharon's eyes twitched, and tears could be seen dripping from her eyes. The tears which came out of her eyes weren't because of Nancy's condition, but instead, it was because she was unable to move an inch from where she was. The pale man had locked an intense amount of killing intent on her that, even though she wanted to run away from here, she couldn't. Thud. A few minutes after, and Nancy's head dropped to the ground. Blood spurted out of her neck, and the pale man's body was soon covered in blood. "Tiah!" The pale man spat on the ground. "It's only so-so." The man spoke with a disgusted expression on his face. He then glanced at Sharon, who was trembling violently. "I hope you taste better." "Why you?" Sharon gasped, and before she could even react, a pale man appeared in front of her. He buried his fangs into her neck, just the same he had done to Nancy, and within a few minutes, Sharon was without a head. The pale young man wiped the blood which was on the corner of his lips, and an innocent smile appeared on his face. "Her blood isn't so bad," the man said, as he stared at the two headless bodies on the ground. Aiden gasped. "He is a predator, who is extremely feral, and because of his nature and behavior, everyone calls him the Ripper," Aiden said. "Of them could handle." A stern look appeared on Raphael's face, and when he heard the woman's voice, his eyebrows furrowed. "I hope you're not thinking of changing your mind just because your friend told you about us," Nancy said. "That would really give everyone the impression that you're nothing but a coward." Raphael still didn't allow any of the women's words to get to him, and he continued to ponder how best it was to handle this decision. Raphael wasn't basing his judgment on his superpowers, but instead, it was on the gadget with him. Is it worth it? Raphael thought. Raphael had no fear whatsoever for these women, even after getting to know their ranks, but he had to ask himself if revealing all that much was worth it. And after giving it a deep thought, Raphael shook his head. If he was pushed to the back of the wall, then he would be forced to reveal his hands, but since they were still an option, he was going to take it. "I'm going." Before Raphael could complete his words, a voice rang out in the alley, "Ha ha 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 ha." Followed by that demonic laughter was a young man of pearly white skin appearing in front of Nancy and Sharon. The man was rather lean with black, lank, straggly hair and maniacal red eyes. He was wearing the academy uniform and his hands were placed inside his pocket. As the young man stood in front of Nancy and Sharon, a sinister smile could be seen on his face. "Does the Cabal warning mean nothing to you?" While the man spoke in a soft tone, and a voice that didn't contain the slightest bit of killing intent. When Sharon and Nancy heard the man, they gulped and beads of sweat could be seen all over their forehead. I have said it several times, Raphael shouldn't be touched. I have said it several times, he shouldn't be touched," the man exclaimed. Nancy and Sharon glanced at one another, and without wasting any more time, the both of them fled. They mustered all the strength in their body and ran as though their lives depended on it. However, both of them hadn't covered much ground when the man appeared in front of them. "Why you?" Nancy stuttered. "Who is that?" Raphael asked as he stared at the young man a few meters away from him. Aiden heaved a deep breath. When he heard Raphael, he was about to respond when a scream reverberated the whole surrounding. Ugh! It was Nancy that screamed as a few seconds after the man appeared in front of her, his teeth became long and pointy, and with a movement from the man, he struck his fangs on her neck. The man drove his fangs all the way in, and after finding his preferable spot, he increased his biting force, and then ripped the flesh of the region out. Once the flesh was out, the tissues, blood vessels, and cells were out in the open. The man devilishly licked his lips and soon began to dine on Nancy's meat as though it were some sort of delicacy. Before the tight grip of the pale young man, Nancy found herself incapable of moving, but she still managed to utter a few words out of her mouth. "Paul, please Tilda." Nancy's plead didn't seem to mean anything to the pale young man as he continued to feast heavily on her neck. The man chewed every piece of flesh that came his way and savored in the taste of Nancy's blood heavily. The sound of bones cracking soon sounded from Nancy's body, as when the man came across one of her neck bones, he gnawed on it right away. Despite Nancy's screams and the blood which was oozing out of her neck, there was no remorse or pity from the man. He held her body tight and buried his fangs deep into her. Meanwhile, Sharon's eyes twitched, and tears could be seen dripping from her eyes. The tears which came out of her eyes weren't because of Nancy's condition, but instead, it was because she was unable to move an inch from where she was. The pale man had locked an intense amount of killing intent on her that, even though she wanted to run away from here, she couldn't. Thud. A few minutes after, and Nancy's head dropped to the ground. Blood spurted out of her neck, and the pale man's body was soon covered in blood. "Tiah!" The pale man spat on the ground. "It's only so-so." The man spoke with a disgusted expression on his face. He then glanced at Sharon, who was trembling violently. "I hope you taste better." "Why you?" Sharon gasped, and before she could even react, a pale man appeared in front of her. He buried his fangs into her neck, just the same he had done to Nancy, and within a few minutes, Sharon was without a head. The pale young man wiped the blood which was on the corner of his lips, and an innocent smile appeared on his face. "Her blood isn't so bad," the man said, as he stared at the two headless bodies on the ground. Aiden gasped. "He is a predator, who is extremely feral, and because of his nature and behavior, everyone calls him the Ripper," Aiden said. "Ripper?" Raphael mumbled the name in a low voice. Aiden and Devon nodded their head when they heard him. They stared at the pale young man who was feasting on the bodies of Nancy and Sharon, and a frown appeared on their face. "You know how people get really addicted to alcohol, but instead of alcohol, Ripper's addiction is to bloodlust. When he gets consumed by bloodlust, his morality is irrelevant, and once he starts feeding, he won't stop until he has ripped his victims into pieces. Which is why people refer to him as the Ripper," Devon said. Raphael couldn't help but be alarmed. He raised his hand and stared at Ripper. "How strong is he?" Raphael asked. Even though the two women were A-rank meta-humans with high power ranks, the pale young man had handled both of them as though he were simply squashing bugs. "Very, very strong," Devon and Aiden replied simultaneously. As Raphael heard the both of them, he raised an eyebrow. "Let me put it this way," Devon said. "The strongest meta-human you have probably encountered in the academy is Serena. You see, if Serena goes head-to-head with Ripper, I can assure you that she won't last up to 10 minutes. Ripper would crush her. So, he is that strong, Raphael muttered, as even though he hadn't seen Serena battle with someone or fought with her, he could always sense that she was very powerful. And yet, when compared to this pale young man, Serena was still lacking behind. From how Devon had phrased his word, Serena was no way near to comparing to Ripper. Though they are all Year 3 students, Ripper is the fourth most powerful student in the Year 3 divisions, while Serena is at number 6. Aiden exclaimed, "There are still 3 other students who are stronger than Ripper." Raphael placed his hand on his chin as he spoke. Raphael couldn't possibly imagine how strong those other 3 were, as merely Ripper in front of him gave him an unusual feeling. "Oh shit, he has moved on to the next person," Aiden said, as after feasting on Nancy's body till only her scattered bones were left, Ripper pulled Sharon's body closer to him, and soon began to dine on it. "I'm going to puke." While Aiden and Devon had witnessed killings of all kinds during their years in the academy, the way Ripper took care of his business was different than the rest. According to those who were closer to Ripper, it was said that Ripper considered himself to be an artist, and when he worked on his victims, each bite and chewing was done with style. "Oh, God, I can't watch this anymore," Devon said, and then turned around. Aiden stared at the scene for a few more seconds before turning towards Raphael and saying, "Raphael, I've been meaning to ask, is there a reason why the Students' Council and the Cabal are backing you this much? Don't get me wrong, I don't have any problem with it, but I'm just really curious. I have never seen the both of them act this way to any students in the academy," Aiden said. It wasn't only Aiden who was curious about the Student Council and the Cabal. Devon was also just as curious, and when he heard Aiden, he stared at Raphael. Raphael, however, simply flashed a smile. "I actually don't have any explanation why the both of them are like that. Perhaps they were one of the clients I worked for." "Clients?" Devon mumbled. "Yeah, Serena introduced me to a couple of people years ago. I have never met any of them since we mostly talk on the phone, but if there's a reason why I think the 2 of them are like that, it should be because of that." Aiden and Devon placed a hand on their chin. They were about to speak, when they felt all the hairs on their body erect. As the 2 of them stared at one another, they gulped, and very slowly, they turned around. "Why you?" Ripper, Aiden stammered as Ripper had appeared in front of him. Ripper, however, didn't glance at the both of them, and instead, his eyes were glued to Raphael. Though Ripper had withdrawn his fangs and claws and also wasn't brimming any killing intent, they were an inborn aura he excluded that made others feel frightened and intimidated around him. And after staring at those cold eyes for a few seconds, Aiden and Devon found themselves unable to glance at him anymore. The both of them lowered their heads, hoping this nightmare was going to end. Meanwhile, Raphael and Ripper had eyes glued to one another. The tension in the surrounding became intense very quickly, and it was only after a few minutes that it lessened. It's nice to finally meet you, Raphael Queen." Raphael smiled. "The same goes for you, Ripper." As Ripper offered a handshake, Raphael responded immediately. Ripper nodded his head, and then glanced at the students who were staring at him in the surrounding, including Bane. Once they all saw Ripper glaring at them, they swiftly shifted their gaze. "Raphael is with me, coming after him means coming after me and the Cabal. If this ever happens again, I won't spare any of you." With that said, Ripper turned around and walked out of the alley. As he took each step out, everyone was staring at him with fear and panic written evidently on their faces. While being a member of the Cabal made Ripper a force to not be reckoned with, the powers, strength, and sadistic side he possesses made him extremely dangerous. "I knew hanging out with you was the right thing to do, Raphael." A few seconds after Ripper left, Bane appeared in front of Raphael. "This is really good. I just have to say that I'm close friends with you, and the deal is sealed." Ha 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 ha. Devon rolled his eyes when at Bane, and as for Aiden, a smile could be seen on his face. "Not you too," Devon said, shaking his head at Aiden. "What?" Exclamation mark. What Bane means is that he can use his Raphael to pick up girls in the academy. though the idea is a little petty, people do it a lot, Aidan muttered, and seeing that look on Devon's he said, look at how everyone is staring at us. As Devon stared at the surrounding, his heart skipped a beat because it was really just like Aidan had said, everyone was staring at them. The women were giving all sorts of flirtation signals, and as for the men, they had a terrified look on their faces. You can't blame them, can you? Bane spoke as he winked seductively to one of the women ahead of him. As for Raphael, a neutral expression remained on his face. Raphael only took a glance at the women who were adjusting their clothes, revealing more cleavage and body parts for a few seconds, before moving his gaze away from him. Later guys, Raphael had only taken a few steps forward when a dark portal appeared in front of him. Raphael was about to speak when he heard Aidan, today has been a long day, I say we attend the club some other time, what do you think? Devon and Bane shrugged their shoulder, and with a thumbs ups from Aidan, the four of them went into the portal. As Raphael, Devon, Aidan, and Bane appeared in the dormitory, Bane leapt on the couch right away. Devon went into the kitchen, and Aidan took the gamepad from the table. Seeing how Raphael was staring at the both of them, Aidan and Bane glanced at one another. Do you want to play? Aidan asked. No, I have something to take care of, Raphael responded. Oh, Bane and Aidan's mouths opened slightly. The two of them nodded their heads and were about to start the game when Raphael's voice rang out. The both of you have been in the academy for quite some time. Raphael paused. You also know Ripper, so apart from his bloodlust, do you know any other information like powers or something that he was? Based on the traits Raphael saw from Ripper, he was able to discern a little from Ripper, but he was perplexed and also wasn't satisfied with what he knew about him. Ripper? Ripper is of Before Aidan could complete his word, the room door was slammed open, and a figure rushed into the room. As the person stared into the room and saw Raphael, an expression of relief appeared on the person's face. A second after and the person dashed toward Raphael. The act caught Raphael surprised, and before he could even realize what was going on, he felt a soft hand wrapped around him, and the person's head placed on his chest. Thank God, you're fine. Meanwhile, as Aidan and Bane saw the girl who just barged into the room and then hugged Raphael, their eyes twitched, and the both of them couldn't help but be dumbfounded. A minute later, Melinda and Becky rushed into the room. Eliza, you shouldn't worry, he's going to be... Melinda paused, her mouth opened slightly, as she stared at Eliza, who was hugging Raphael tightly. As for Becky who was beside her, a smile hung on her face. Crunch. As Devon stepped out of the kitchen and saw what was going on in the living room, the glass of water he was holding onto dropped to the floor. Devon's eyes twitched, his mouth opened slightly, and a stupefied expression could be seen on his face. Eliza regained her composure after a few more seconds, and as she moved away from Raphael, who was in a trance state, she heaved a deep breath. I'm sorry, I thought something happened to you, Eliza muttered. The five other people in the living room shifted their gaze away from Eliza and were now staring at Raphael, wondering what he was going to say. However, there was no response from Raphael as he continued to stare at Eliza. Raphael, are you okay? This time around, when Raphael heard Eliza, he responded by simply nodding his head. I'm fine, Raphael said with neither a smile nor a frown on his face. The room suddenly became really awkward, and as Melinda and Becky glanced at each other, the both of them raised an eyebrow. Melinda and Becky had a brief telepathic conversation, and after a short, Melinda's voice rang out. So, what exactly happened? We heard the four of you came across Ripper in the alley. How did that happen? Becky said. Also, is this how you treat female guests? Say no more, Bane responded, and with a wave of his hand, numerous insects walked out of the kitchen with all of them uniting to carry a tray of glass water to the living room. Becky's lips curved into a slight frown when she saw the insects who were moving forward, and as the insects got closer to her, she stared at Bane and said, You ever wondered why you're single? This is one of the many reasons, Becky exclaimed. Despite her words, Becky bent slightly and took one of the glasses on the tray, and as Becky drank the water, Bane spoke. You ever wonder why you were the first to be offered? I knew you were going to say something ridiculous, so I had the insects secrete in your water. Chewy. The instant Becky heard Bane, she spat out the content which was inside her mouth. She kept on spitting, and it was only after she seemed to have gotten the whole content, that she stopped and then glared at Bane. I'm going to kill you. Becky already clenched her hand into a tight fist and was about to launch herself at Bane when Melinda held her body tightly. Ha 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 ha, I was only joking, Bane said, and seeing the look on Aiden's face, he said, why would I do something that vile? She already has enough to deal with. That wall she refers to as a chest is already enough for her to deal with, Bane mumbled in a tone that only he could hear. Though Becky didn't hear any of the words he had just said, she was still very pissed from his earlier word. I have to go take another bath, and also wash every corner of my mouth. With that said, and Becky dashed out of the room. SHHH, it's really not funny, Bane, Melinda sneered. Anyway, what happened in the alley? Melinda asked. This is how it started. It was Aiden that spoke, and he soon began to narrate everything that happened back in the alley. Aiden went on about Nancy and Sharon, and how Ripper had savagely killed the both of them. Apart from what Raphael told him about, Aiden informed the girls about everything that took place in the alley. The cabal is really putting much effort in you enjoying them, Melinda said as she stared at Raphael. If it was left to me, I would say you join them, though the cabal are extremely ruthless. In a place like this they offer the best protection. You might think you don't need them now, but trust me you do. We are still being pampered by the academy, after all. A horizontal wrinkle appeared on Raphael's forehead when he heard Melinda. What do you mean, we are still being pampered? Raphael asked. The academy isn't this peaceful. As a matter of fact, it is only this area and some other region that is settled. We are still living a carefree life because we are freshers. Once we move to year 2 and another student swoop in, we are no longer the academy spoiled brats. So, you see why I say joining the cabal is the right thing to do, Melinda said. Raphael's face went blank, and his eyes squinted slightly. Ripper is extremely dangerous and likewise very powerful. Melinda paused, she then glanced around the room in a different direction. You know from what I have heard Ripper possesses structural immortality. Devon, Aiden, and Bane stared at one another when they heard Melinda. While Aiden gulped, Bane shook his head. No, that's impossible. There is no such thing as immortality. It's likely a regeneration ability that comes with his vampire traits that you are mistaken for structural immortality, Bane stated. This time around, it was Melinda who shook her head. Regeneration ability, my ass. Elise's elder sister who is in the same year as Ripper has seen him suffer all manner of injury to the most extreme degree, only to reform himself back. It's best to be an ally than an enemy to someone like that, especially one who is that powerful, Melinda said. The expression on Raphael's face changes very quickly when he heard Melinda. If Melinda was speaking the truth, then Ripper was a huge menace on his part. It was no wonder why Elisa had been worried. Raphael didn't have to stare to his left side before he knew Elisa's brown eyes were on him, and while he was in deep thought about what he had just learned, Raphael managed to keep a straight face. Bang! Suddenly, the room door was blasted open once again, and Becky entered the room. Becky was putting on a new set of clothes, and the former frown that she had on her face had vanished. Instead, it was replaced with a smile. What did I miss? A few seconds after Becky spoke, and the beep sound rang out from everyone's wristwatch, they glanced at one another, before then staring at the wristwatch. Displaying on the surface of the screen was a new mission assigned. As everyone read what was written on the wristwatch, their lips curved slightly. Here we go again. As the students in the Year 1 Elite Division received the new mission alert, and the date that was proposed, everyone began making preparation immediately. They were going to be leaving the academy premises tomorrow. A few hours had passed since the notification, and once it was evening, the students all gathered in the classroom for the class they were having. I'm Nora Stinson, and I will be taking your business course. A middle-aged woman putting on a black blazer, white shirt, and a black pantsuit stood in front of the students. The woman's eyes were blue, and her brown hair was cut into a flare cut. Though she had a fairly broad-shouldered torso, she possessed a buxom figure. Additionally, she was wearing a pair of earrings on her ears. Let me tell you 4 things about myself and how I expect my class to be. I'm not your friend. You listen attentively in my class. You speak when I say you should. Don't try to play any silly game with me in the class. And lastly, I don't play fair. Nora said. You said 4, but that's 5 things. It was Jackson that spoke, and in response, Nora's lips curved slightly. See? Not playing fair already. And I'm just getting started. I have heard a lot of comments about you from Emily, and while Emily and the others might be able to tolerate your behaviors, I won't. I can be painfully vindictive, and I also expect you to get to my class 10 minutes before I'm here. Nora had just finished her word when 4 students appeared in the classroom. As the 4 of them entered the classroom, 2 gave her a slight nod, and for the remaining 2, sat on the chairs with a smile on their face. Nora's eyebrows were lowered, and then pulled together when she saw the 4 students that just appeared in her classroom. Devon, Raphael, Aiden, and Bane, right? I have been told that being late is a common habit for the 4 of you, Nora said, but you see that wouldn't be happening next in my class because if you do so each of you will be paying a sum of 500,000 points. What? Exclamation mark. Bane exclaimed when he heard what Nora had just said. Nora, however, simply raised an eyebrow. You can test me out, and see whether I'm joking or not. Don't also think if you don't have that amount, you will be spared. All the items you own will be confiscated until you provide the points. A deep frown couldn't help but appear on the 4 of their faces when they heard Nora. Aiden and Bane stared at Devon, and it was as though the both of them wanted to pounce on them. This time around, it wasn't Raphael who didn't come out of the room on time, but instead, it was Devon who delayed. It doesn't only apply to the 4 of them, but also all of you. Seeing the smile a few of the students had on their faces, Nora's voice rang out. The smiles which were on their faces vanished the instant they heard Nora, and a cold expression emerged right away. Now let's get down to business. I believe you have all received the mission notification, Nora said, and receiving a nod from a couple of them, she said, but, this time around, the Academy has decided to adopt a new set of rules. You will still be taught in the same classes, but when working on the mission, you will be in a different squad, as according to the rules within the universe, 3-man squads are optimal, so in this case, 21 students would be arranged into 7 squads, or, better still, 7 teams. It's more or less like what you did during your previous mission, but instead of you all forming the teams, that would be done by the Academy. As Nora spoke, she brought a piece of paper from her pocket. I won't repeat my word, so you should listen attentively. Team 1A Mason, Becky, and Melinda. Team 2A Norma, Camille, and Jackson. Team 3A Savannah, Sean, and Bane. Team 4A Ethan, Edward, and Levi. There were all sorts of reactions from the students when they heard their teammates, and after Nora announces the 4th team, she paused and then stared at Levi and the twins. The Academy was impressed by the 3 of your performance in your previous mission, and as such, they arranged you all together, Nora said. A proud smile appeared on Levi's face when he heard Nora. He folded his hands across his chest. As to him, Nora had indirectly told him that the Academy had eyes on him. Team 5A Sylvia, Devon, and Xavier. As Nora got down to the final 6, Melinda and Becky's hands were clenched into a tight fist. The both of them were seriously hoping that the Academy would pair their friend and one other person together because only that way would things become smooth. However, both of them were left shaken when Nora's voice rang out. Team 6A Aiden, Eliza, and Martha. Team 7A Alia and Dwayne and Raphael. A second after Nora announced the 6th team, she called the 7th team immediately. Melinda and Becky's eyes twitched when they heard who the members of Team 7 were. Their hands were placed on their head, and they were left dumbfounded. As for Raphael, his eyebrows furrowed, and as he stared at Dwayne and most especially Alia, he heaved a deep breath. The universe is really toying with me. Raphael mumbled in a low voice. Nora, who was in front of the class, was completely oblivious to all that was going on. Each team was chosen based on performances and compatibility. Nora paused as Melinda stood from her seat. "Are you certain they aren't a mistake somewhere?" Melinda abruptly said. Nora glared at Melinda for a few seconds before then shaking her head. The teams weren't just chosen based on the mission performance, but it was also recommended by the teachers who tutored you all both in class and training. There is no mistake in the selection. I say you stick with the arrangement because there won't be a change occurring anytime soon. Well, except if one of you dies. As Becky and Melinda heard Nora, a demonic smile appeared on their face as they stared at Aliyah. "Why you?" A few seconds after, a blade made of bones appeared on Melinda's base knuckles. The bones shrunk back immediately. Melinda shifted her gaze towards Eliza, and seeing her shaking her head, Melinda heaved a deep breath. Becky also heaved a deep breath, before then focusing her attention back on Nora. "Let's move to the next phase," Nora said. "Each team is assigned different missions, but the missions are related to the business course in some cases. So I will be educating you on what you should expect in the field." Nora took the black marker on the desk and then wrote the following word on the whiteboard: "Analytics ability. In the missions you would take during your next few years in the academy, some of you would be encountering powerful businessmen, and some might even get the chance to work with them." Nora said, then began walking around the classroom. "I won't dismiss that before absolute strength. All attempts are in vain, but there are some cases whereby, with wits and studying theories, you can achieve the impossible. The Academy has entrusted me to impart to you all the various range of business skills. Most people have failed to realize the true beauty of business. The power that comes with becoming a successful businessman or woman is so astounding that you can rule the world if you like." As Nora spoke, the students were all quiet. They listened attentively, as some words weren't false. A human might be powerful, but if he doesn't have communication and people skills, he will suffer in this petty world. There are generally infinite ways of solving problems in the business world, and these ways can also be applied in the real world. Today's class will be focused on analytical thinking and credible reasoning, Nora said. "I can assure you that when we are done with the range of skills, even if you do not become the most powerful meta-human in the world, you won't be far away from there. With excellent strategizing ability, quick decision-making, and terrific planning, I would like to see how you wouldn't have a spot in the world," Nora uttered with her hands folded across her chest. The next few minutes were spent with Nora teaching all there is to know about both analytical thinking and credible reasoning. Thinking practically and applying theory to experiences was what the analytical thinking was based on, and with Nora's persistence, the students were able to understand the notion. Ring. That will be all for today. I wish you good luck on your mission. Goodbye. With that said, and Nora left the classroom, the students also started leaving the classroom, as they would be leaving the academy very soon. Inside a 68-acre luxurious private manor, a woman and two men sat opposite to one another. The woman had brown eyes and back-length silver hair that featured a long braid on each side with small blue bows at the end. She appeared to be in her early 20s, and as she sat in front of the two men, a stern expression could be seen on her face. As for the two men in front of her, they had black eyes, very tan skin as well as a powerful build. One of them, however, had curly brown hair while the other was bald, and as they stared at the woman also, both of them had a very serious look on their face. The company votes take place within the next 48 hours, one of the men said, and then pushed the documents on the desks to the woman's front. "You simply have to sign here and here." The man pointed his hand at two sections of the document. The woman, however, continued to stare at the document, which was represented with an eyebrow raised. It was only after which she had given it a deep thought that she took the black pen on the desk, and then signed on the document. "Thanks for your cooperation. I hope we will get to keep this partnership of ours after the takeover is complete." It was the bald man who spoke as he took the document. As the two of them stood from their seats, they were about to head towards the door when the man with curly brown hair abruptly paused. You should also get yourself fully prepared for bankruptcy, because if your sister should come out on top instead of you, living might as well as become a nightmare for you," the man said with a sneer on his face. "That's if she can even make it until then." Ha 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 ha. A chuckle escaped the mouth of the bald man who was beside, and after giving the woman a slight bow, both of them walked out of the room. A few seconds after the both of them left, the woman angrily stood from her chair and then flipped the desk to the other side. The woman rubbed her hand across her hair and then clenched her hand into a tight fist. "Those damn bastard!" The woman's breathing became erratic, and a vertical wrinkle appeared between her eyebrows as she stared at the door. After the woman got her breathing under control, she picked up the telephone from the floor. "Get in my office now," she exclaimed. It wasn't even up to a minute after the woman flinging the telephone away, that a tall man with a long face, broad chin, and pronounced cheekbone appeared in the room. The man was putting on a luxurious black suit, and as he stared at the woman, an expression full of respect was evident on his face. "How many votes have we secured in this takeover?" she asked. "We have more than half of the shareholders supporting us in this takeover," the man responded. "I don't think there's anything to worry about in this coming election. We are certainly going to win." While the tall man spoke with complete confidence, the woman didn't seem to buy any of the words he had just said. She shook her head when she heard the man. "Securing the votes isn't the essential aspect of this takeover. What matters is what occurs during the next 48 hours, and we can't afford to lose the election. The stakes are just too high." The woman heaved a deep breath. "You shouldn't worry about anything, Kayla. There's no way your sister, Chloe, would beat us. We simply have to ensure your safety for the next 48 hours, and we have won the battle." The man moved closer to the woman. Suddenly, a frown appeared on the woman's face. "Speaking of safety, where are the people we contracted?" she said in a displeased tone. "I thought we agreed we were going to handle this problem by ourselves, and we won't involve anyone." The man said, "There are guards all over the manor. What other support can they possibly render that we can't handle?" As the woman heard the man, she glared at him with a tinge of killing intent present in her eyes. "What help can they possibly render? It best you keep your mouth shut, because those words can get you killed. We should be elated that they decided to help us with this pursuit. I might have not encountered any of them before, but I have heard words about them. They are masterminds who operate behind the scene, and according to Mother, they possess the power to govern the world to its whim. If there's someone we can count on in the next 48 hours, then it should be them. So, where the hell are they?" Kayla raised her voice at the man. But the man was about to speak when he received a deathly glare from Kayla. The man brought a cell phone out of his pocket, and then quickly dialed a number. "Bring them over to the main house," the man said, and he ended the call. "Kayla, the price they are demanding is excessively much. Even if they are as good as you say they are practically demanding for the company's ownership." This time around, the man ignored the glare of the woman. "Even if we win the takeover, the company would only belong to you in name. You will run the company, but you won't own the company." Kayla sneered. "I don't mind. So, as long as Chloe doesn't get the company, I really don't care. Look, it isn't too late. We can still offer them money, and have them leave. Let's deal with this problem by ourselves. Because once they get involved, we are going to become slaves for them." Greek. The man had just spoken when the room door was pushed, and 4 figures walked into the room. "You may leave, Peter." The man's voice rang out, and a full-bearded man putting on a butler attire walked out of the room. As the butler left, Kayla and the man stared at the 2 boys who appeared to be in their teens, and the white-haired girl beside them, and both of their mouths opened slightly. "Why you?" Kayla stuttered. "You are?" The 3 people who walked into the room were Raphael, Dwayne, and Aliur, and as the 3 of them heard Kayla, their eyebrows furrowed, and they glanced at one another. "Aren't you Kayla Winchester, the one who wants to take her sister position in the Burger Queen Corporation, and become the new head?" Exclamation mark. It was Raphael that spoke. Kayla's eyes twitched when she heard Raphael. She hadn't been expecting those words to be addressed like that, but she still nodded her head in response. "Yes, I'm Kayla Winchester, and this is Sebastian," Kayla said, The three of you are from that organization, right? And seeing the expression on Raphael, Dwayne, and Alia's faces, Kayla shook her head. I'm just stunned since you all look very young. Anyway, let's get down to business. Kayla flashed a rough smile and then waved her hand towards the seat in the room. However, Raphael, Dwayne, and Alia shook their head. We are good. We will be by your side for the next 48 hours, and we'll leave afterward. The rest of the payment should also be deposited after the hours are completed. Dwayne's cold voice rang out. The Kayla was about to speak when Sebastian's voice rang out. Kayla, are you simply going to act as if you aren't bothered with all this? It's already insane that they are asking for that exorbitant price, but instead of sending over the stronger members, they chose to send us their kids. Sebastian exclaimed. It's quite obvious that we mean nothing to them, or why else would they send these little ones over? What could they possibly do against the people we are going up against? It's like you said, a lot is at stake here. We have sacrificed a lot to have that takeover election, and the next 48 hours are going to be vital. Sebastian said, we need men and not kids. Thank goodness that I didn't rely on them, and instead I had guards in place for this battle ahead of us, or else we won't even stand a chance. There's also no way we will pay that fee once this is over. Kayla bit her lips hard and then clenched her hand into a tight fist. Sebastian, that's enough. Get the hell out of the room. Get the hell out of the room, Kayla yelled. Sebastian glared at Raphael, Dwayne, and Alia before he walked out of the room. I apologize for his behavior. The past few days have been difficult for everyone. Kayla had only just spoken finish when the light in the house suddenly went off. Kayla shifted her gaze to the window and stared at the compound through it. It wasn't just the main house light that went off, it was the light of the whole house that went off. They are here, followed by Kayla's words with the room window smashed, and 7 figures appeared inside the room. The 7 of them were all putting on a black hood, black robe, with red sashes, and a black mask on. It wasn't even up to a minute after the 7 figures in black robes entered the room in the main house when the room door was slammed open and a tall man was sent flying in. The tall man was none other than Sebastian. As he was sent flying by that kick, Sebastian stood from the floor, and then wiped the blood which was around the corner of his lips. Don't worry, I'm going to protect you, Sebastian exclaimed as he stood in the middle of the room, assuming a battle stance. Fool. A second after Sebastian spoke, Raphael's voice rang out. Raphael had an expression full of mockery on his face as he stared at Sebastian, whose suit had become very tattered. The suit that Sebastian was putting on a few minutes ago was nothing compared to what he had on now. It was like he had replaced the luxurious suit with rags instead. Sebastian glared at Raphael. He seemed to be about to speak, when someone walked into the room. Staring at the person who was also putting on similar outfits to the figures in the room, the frown on Sebastian's face deepened. Kayla Winchester, your casket has been arranged. Before the man could complete his words, an arrow suddenly ripped through his chest. As the man stumbled to the ground, the other 7 who were in the room advanced very quickly. Among the 7 of them, 4 were holding onto a long sword, 2 had a short blade, and the last person was using a pair of trident daggers. Once the 7 figures in black robes advanced, Dwayne shot 3 bows at the ones coming at his right and then another 3 at his left side. Boom! Followed by the sound of the arrow being fired came the sound of an explosion. Unlike the first kill, this time around when the arrow penetrated their bodies, it didn't simply just stop their heartbeats, but it also made their heart explode. After taking care of the 6 of them, Dwayne quickly shifted his gaze towards the one remaining and was about to take an arrow from his quiver, when he felt a movement. It was Raphael who made a move. As Raphael went up against the assassin who was using a trident dagger, a sadistic smile could be seen on his face. Seeing Raphael ahead, the assassin struck out one of the trident daggers forward, and as for the other, he kept it by him, to deliver another blow. However, a few seconds for Raphael to come in contact with the dagger, Raphael stretched his palm forward. What the? It was the voice of the assassin that rang out, as once the dagger came in contact with Raphael, instead of it piercing through him, the dagger crumbled into pieces instead. The assassin quickly attacked with the other trident dagger in his hand. However, it was just his previous attempt. Once the dagger met with Raphael, they crumbled right away. Though the assassin had a mask on, it was well assumed that a horrified expression would be on his face. The assassin staggered several steps backward, in an attempt to regain composure, only to be met by a full-force blow by Raphael. After sending forth a knee strike to the assassin's abdomen, Raphael didn't stop at that, and a second after he delivered the knee blow to the assassin, he struck an uppercut right away. Bam! The mask the assassin had on was already sent flying by that uppercut, and as stumbled to the floor, the man appeared lifeless. "Why you?" Seeing how the assassins that appeared in the room were taken care of very easily, Sebastian's mouth opened slightly and an expression full of disbelief could be seen evidently on his face. A sneer appeared on Raphael when he saw the look on Sebastian's face. "Just because you are older doesn't make you wiser or stronger. You can be old and still be foolish and weak," Raphael said as he stared at Sebastian. Sebastian was about to speak, when Kayla waved a hand at him. "It's all right, Sebastian," Kayla said, and then went over to the desk on the other side of the room. She sat on the seat and then turned on the system. Oh, this is really bad," Kayla exclaimed. "They have cleared the 3 of the living quarters in the house and are now making their way to the main house and the carriage house." The house they were all at was built using innovative building techniques and materials that seek to provide comfort and maximum level of security. There were 5 living quarters in the house: the security quarter, the carriage house, the captain cottage, the guest apartment, and lastly the main house. And among those 3, it was only the main house and the captain's cottage that hadn't been fully invaded by the assassins yet. "Sebastian, how the hell is this possible? I thought you said you had guards all over the area, so how can they take out so many of them without anyone realizing it sooner?" Kayla yelled. Sebastian's mouth quivered. He wanted to respond to Kayla, but as he opened his mouth to speak, he wasn't able to get any word out of his mouth. Kayla hit her fists against the desk, and the corner of her mouth pointed downward. "Chloe, just you wait. Once these 48 hours are up, and the Burger Queen Corporation is finally mine, I will shred you into pieces," Kayla said as her eyes then flickered with killing intent. The Burger Queen Corporation, which the 2 sisters were battling for, is one of the most popular and common food chains in the world. The burger they produced was one of the best, serving more than 5 million customers around the world daily. While the corporation focused on all other food menus, it was the burgers that they produced that people were really after. The corporation operates with restaurants over 50,000 worldwide, and restaurants all over the world. As Kayla watched the footage of the other quarters in the house, she couldn't help but be more furious, seeing how the servants and guards were being slaughtered like pigs. Dwayne, who had remained quiet the whole time, suddenly moved towards Kayla. He stared at the screen she was gazing at, and after a few seconds his voice rang out. "We can't wait for them to get to us before we make a move. If we want to avoid any difficulty, we need to move right away," Dwayne said. "I will handle the 2 living quarters, the remaining 3 shouldn't be a problem for the both of you." And with that said, Dwayne shot a grabbing hook arrow at one of the buildings in the house. After the ownership of the Burger Queen Corporations was passed on to Chloe, Kayla had been looking for every method in the book to get the corporation from her younger sister. However, every single attempt she had pulled off over the years was fruitless. It was only now that she stood a chance against Chloe. Chloe knew her sister was ahead of her, so before the vote will be decided in the next 48 hours, she had to put an end to her sister. If Kayla was dead before the vote was decided, she would get to keep the corporation, but if she wasn't, Chloe would have to resign from the position. And once that decision was made, even if Chloe were to kill her elder sister later, there was still no use, as the company would choose a new owner among the other main shareholders. "I will handle the 2 living quarters." A second after Dwayne left, Alia's voice rang out. "You should stay with her just in case," Alia said. Raphael raised an eyebrow when he heard Alia. "Why don't you stay with her?" While Raphael seemed to be asking Alia a question, the action he took said otherwise. Raphael didn't wait for Alia to respond to him. and after he spoke, he began walking out of the room. Raphael was about to take a step out of the room when a figure putting on a similar robe as the assassin from earlier appeared in front of him. The assassin had a brass knuckle on, and as Raphael took a step forward, the assassin wasted no time and immediately struck the brass knuckle at Raphael's left chest. Just about the brass knuckle was to come in contact with Raphael, a woman with long wavy white hair appeared in front of the assassin. Aliyah held the assassin's neck and then pushed the assassin several steps backward. Raphael's eyes twitched. He was about to make a move, when Aliyah suddenly let go of the assassin. The assassin went to his knees instantly, and as he removed the mask on his face, his voice rang out, "Command me, mistress, command me, mistress," the assassin uttered in a decisive tone, and as he stared at Aliyah, the expression which he had on his face was filled with worship, adoration, and respect. Aliyah waved her hand, and the assassin immediately leapt to his feet. "Kill all those who invaded the house," Aliyah stated with a light frown on her face. "Yes, mistress." Once Aliyah's voice rang out, the assassin didn't waste any time whatsoever, and he immediately dashed out. He moved about the main house, and any of his colleagues he encountered were slaughtered. Just as ordered, the other assassins the man encountered were oblivious to what had just occurred, and a few of them let their guards down, seeing that it was one of their own. It was only after the man struck his brass knuckle into them, that they realized that something was wrong. However, it was too late, as the brass knuckle that the man had on was laced with a deadly poison. Once the brass knuckle made contact with a human body, the poison would spread very quickly, and within a matter of seconds, the heart would stop beating. Meanwhile, after Aliyah had enslaved the man, she left the room as well. As for Raphael, he remained in that position with a bewildered expression on his face. Thank goodness, I made no advances toward her. I would have become a puppet." It was Sebastian that spoke. He then scratched his hand and heaved a deep breath of relief. Kayla's eyes twitched when she witnessed the scene of the man going on his knees, and seeing how he rushed out after hearing Aliyah's command, she couldn't help but gulp. Pew. As Aliyah focused on the two other living quarters, Dwayne dealt with the remaining three. Dwayne's skill in his weapon was so stunning that he didn't miss any of his targets, and those who were punctured by his arrows exploded into pieces. Their bodies were scattered all over the compounds, and the other areas in the house. Boom. The assassins in the area had considered Dwayne to be at a huge threat level, and most of them chose to place their attention on him, while the others sneaked into the main house. In the battle between Dwayne and the assassins, apart from his unnatural skill in bow and arrow, Dwayne's other advantage came from the fact that the arrows in this quiver were numerous. The Academy had created the quiver in such a way that Dwayne was able to stick up to 300 arrows in there, and if he pleases the number could as well go up to 500, so, Dwayne just kept shooting the arrows in his quiver without having to worry about it becoming empty. "I will take care of him, you go deal with the rest, and find me." Kayla Winchester, one of the assassins with a rather lanky build, appeared a few meters away from Dwayne. Once the assassin spoke, the others who were in the area immediately vanished from the surrounding, leaving only Dwayne and the assassin known as the headhunter. Dwayne had one of his hands on his bow and the other on his arrow. He simply had to let go of his right hand and the arrow would launch right at the assassin in front of him. The assassin suddenly brought a black longsword from his side. He also then assumed a battle stance. The name is Headhunter, with that said, and he moved. Meanwhile, Dwayne's eyes twitched, and his mouth opened slightly, as when the assassin moved, it was as though he disappeared. Dwayne was however able to keep his composure and continued to scan the surrounding. Suddenly, the assassin who referred to himself as Headhunter appeared in front of Dwayne. As Headhunter appeared, he brought forth a sword and then aimed it at Dwayne's throat immediately. Dwayne reacted very quickly, and before the sword could drill through his throat, he moved his body to his left, and after that movement, Dwayne used the bow to hit the assassin on his face at full force, and as the assassin staggered several steps backward, with the mask on his face also breaking from the hit, Dwayne shot an arrow at him immediately. The arrow was about to hit its target when the assassin disappeared once again. "I won't miss next," the assassin's cold voice rang out. Dwayne began to scan the whole surrounding once again. However, after a few seconds, he lowered the bow and arrow and then heaved a deep breath. The assassin's ability to vanish from the surrounding was a little problematic for Dwayne, as if he hadn't moved very quickly, he would have already been on the ground already. Dwayne was certain that the assassin's ability to vanish from the area wasn't some invincibility ability or something. Instead, it was likely going to be an inaudible movement. A few seconds after Dwayne shut his eyes closed, he opened them. Dwayne raised his bow slightly, and suddenly, he turned to his left and shot an arrow. Pew, pew. Dwayne didn't stop at just one arrow, as a second after he fired the first arrow, he quickly took another one from his quiver and then fired it once again. The direction in which he aimed it was the same as his first shot. After the 2 arrows were fired, Dwayne brought 3 out and shot them all together, still in the same direction. It was only after Dwayne had delivered the 3rd round of arrows that he lowered his bow, and a second after a man whose body was covered in arrows appeared. "Why you?" With blood oozing out of his eyes, the assassin stuttered as he pointed his finger at Dwayne. The assassin had 2 arrows embedded in both of his eyes, and 3 more on his body. The black sword he was holding onto dropped to the ground, and after staggering for a couple of seconds, he fell to the ground. Dwayne merely glanced at the assassin for a brief moment, before moving his gaze and then moving on to the next target. While Dwayne covered the compound and the 3 living quarters with his arrows, Raphael decorated the room with skeletons, along with a couple of other bodies that were in the process of fully decaying. And as for Aliyah, she led an army of assassins who were under her command. The 3 of them kept on dealing with the assassin all around the house, and it was only after a while that one of them returned to the main house. As Dwayne glimpsed upon the skeletons and bodies which were on the floor, his eyebrows furrowed. Dwayne raised his head, and saw Raphael sitting on a desk cross-legged, while a blue owl with a blue cape around its neck walked all around the room. "That was fast," Raphael mumbled as he stared at his wristwatch when Wayne appeared. "It's not over yet, there are still more of them coming," Dwayne responded. Dwayne then shifted his gaze to the other side, and as he saw Sebastian, he glanced back at Raphael. Sebastian sat on the ground with his hands around his leg, and his body was trembling violently. There was terror written evidently on his face, almost as though he were battling his inner demons. Raphael kept a straight face when he saw Dwayne looking at him. As for Kayla, she was perhaps the most relaxed person in the room. Kayla was still on the desk, and this time around she was watching the surveillance video of what was going on inside the other living quarters all at once. "This 3rd teammate of yours is really powerful," Kayla exclaimed. "She has made over 20 of them her slaves. Look at them killing each other," Kayla said, turning the system for Raphael and Dwayne to take a look at what was going on in the captain's cottage. Raphael and Dwayne maintained a neutral expression when they saw how Aliyah was in complete control over the assassins and had them kill their mates. Aliyah didn't entirely enslave all the assassins in the house. She placed her focus mainly on the stronger ones among them, and as for the weaker ones, she killed them. "You stay here, my hand is a little itchy." Dwayne was about to use another one of his grabbing hook arrows when Raphael's voice rang out. Raphael then didn't wait for Dwayne to react, and he immediately leapt out of the window. As soon as Raphael made a move, Gus abruptly halted its patrol around the room and flew to Raphael immediately. Kerr. A few seconds after Raphael left the main house, he turned towards Gus who was on his shoulder, and said, "You can kill them if you'd like, I'm not going to stop you." There was a different kind of glow on Gus's face when Raphael spoke. Gus then stared hard at Raphael, and after receiving another nod from Raphael, Gus dashed forward. Raphael and Gus soon went their separate ways, and when Raphael came across one of the assassins, he cracked his knuckles. "This will be fun." With that said, and Raphael launched himself at the assassin. Raphael's movement was so fast that before the assassin could realize what was going on, Raphael had appeared by his side. Raphael's movement was so fast that before the assassin could realize what was going on, he had appeared by his side. Bang! Raphael grabbed the assassin by the face and slammed his body to the ground instantly. The force which Raphael had used when slamming the assassin left a crack on the ground, and followed by the crack, Raphael squeezed the assassin's face so tightly that his head began to shrink at an insane pace. The mask he had on crumbled, and once the mask was gone, the fleshes on his face began to decay rapidly. After leaving only the assassin with his skeletal skull, Raphael gave another tight squeeze and the skull also began to disintegrate. What the? A second after the skull began to disintegrate, a frightened voice rang out from behind Raphael. It was one of the assassins that spoke, and while most of them would have chosen to deliver a sneak attack on Raphael, the scene Raphael had created was so horrifying the assassin was overwhelmed by fear. When Raphael heard the assassin's voice, he turned towards him and then flashed a demonic smile. "Why you?" the assassin stuttered as he saw those pair of eyes that seemed to be flowing with intense killing intent. Once their eyes came into contact, the assassin fled immediately. However, the assassin hadn't covered much ground when a blue owl suddenly emerged in front of him. As the assassin encountered the owl, he only glanced at it for a second before moving his gaze away and was about to increase his pace, when the owl flew towards him. Tilde. A few seconds after and the loud scream of the agony of the assassin rang out. The scream reverberated through the house, and even those who were at the main house were able to hear the scream. Raphael, who was a few meters away from the man, shook his head when he heard that scream. He then strolled to the place the scream was coming from at a steady pace. Sigh, now I finally understand why parents don't allow their children to watch those rated content. They can get captivated by it and some might even want to experience it, Raphael mumbled in a low voice as he arrived in front of the man. While Raphael was staring at the man, his voice wasn't directed at him, and instead, he was speaking to Gus. Gus paid no heed to Raphael, and instead, it remained on top of the assassin's body and began to use its beak to tear the assassin's body apart. And after Gus got a bit of the flesh out, it swallowed it and then paused. "When you are done you know how to find me," Raphael said, then turned around. Even though Gus had its usual look on its face, Raphael, who had been with Gus for a very long time, was absolutely certain that what it tasted definitely enticed its stomach. Perhaps if Raphael had asked Gus not to, then Gus might have not feasted on the assassin's body, but the truth was Raphael didn't have any problem with it. The assassin wasn't a decent person anyway. Time passed very quickly, and as the bodies kept piling up in several parts of the house, the death count increased significantly. Team 7 didn't take a break, as, after a while, Aliur had ordered the assassin to guard the main house. Wayne was then able to move freely. A few hours passed since then. The pale crescent moon had shone like a silvery claw at the night sky, and even the golden sun had emerged. Once the surrounding was cleared up, and after several minutes no assassin appeared within the premises, Raphael, Aliur, and Dwayne returned to the main house. "I have good news." As Kayla saw the three of them appear in the room, her voice rang out. "Chloe has resigned her post. She is no longer the head of Burger Queen Corporation, and giving the majority of the main shareholder as supporting me, they have backed him into becoming the new head of the corporation." Even though Kayla kept a straight face, there was a tinge of excitement present in her voice as she spoke to the three of them. The votes were made, and as of this moment, I am the new head of Burger Queen Corporation. This time around, Kayla wasn't able to hide the smile from appearing on her face. Raphael, Dwayne, and Alia glanced at one another when they heard Gale. "Then I guess our job here is done." It was Dwayne that spoke. Kayla nodded her head. "We have won the battle. If you ever come to Vancouver, please feel to visit," Kayla said. "Since you have become the head of the corporation, and there is no longer any need for our protection in here, I'm requested to tell you that you have 8 hours to make the rest of the payment." Kayla flashed a rough smile at Aliur, before then saying, "I will head to the corporation now, and make the rest of the payment. Goodbye." A second after Kayla spoke, Aliur responded, and she turned around. Aliur, Raphael, and Dwayne were about to step out of the room when Kayla's voice rang out. "Why you? What about them?" Kayla asked as she stared at the assassins who were around the room. There were about 7 of them in the room, and throughout the entire time, Their eyes were glued to Alia with a rather reverent look on their faces. Alia glanced at the assassins. "Do what is required of you to do," Alia said. "Kill yourself." And as they heard Alia, the 7 of them nodded their heads, and without giving it any thought they raised the weapons they were holding onto and slit their throats immediately. There was no hesitation on their part, and even when they stumbled to the floor, a smile could be seen on each of them faces. "Don't you dare!" Raphael exclaimed as he felt a movement from Gus. The instant Gus heard Raphael, it immediately shut its eyes closed, acting as though it didn't have intention toward the bodies on the floor. "Let's go." A few minutes later, and the 3 of them left Kayla's house, with a portal already in place for them. They soon made their way back to the academy.